Chapter 1555. If that's the case, why would the head of the Qiu family be Yanlin's biological grandfather? Xianxia had an indescribable expression on his face. If it weren't for Fengzhen, who was a gossipy person, this relationship would probably never see the light of day again. Both the Qiu family and Yanlin care about their reputation. The head of the Qiu family is willing to risk everything, but do you think Yanlin would like the Qiu family? Fengzhen sneered. Yanlin is not stupid. How can he not know what kind of person the Qiu family is? If he accepts them as relatives, wouldn't his mother be the daughter of the Qiu family's concubine? Not only is she the daughter of a concubine, but she is also the daughter of a prostitute. Even if she has turned over a new leaf, her bloodline is still impure. If he doesn't want to admit it, she is still the daughter of a rich merchant. She is more upright than the previous one. Xianxia sneered. That's true. Fengzhen glanced at Xianxia. Seeing that he was not affected by the words daughter of a prostitute, he was not worried anymore. Even the daughter of a rich merchant can't marry a noble family, right? Xianxia knew that decades ago the social atmosphere was much harsher than in troubled times. There was a clear distinction between the gentry and the commoners, not to mention the daughter of a rich merchant. Even marrying an unfavored son of a concubine from a poor noble family would be like reaching heaven in one step, let alone marrying Yanlin's father. So Yanlin's father didn't want the girl to be a concubine, so he found a way to hide her real identity. He even asked a good friend to take the girl in as his foster daughter. 2 years later, she got married as the foster daughter of an aristocratic family. Xianxia sighed. He is a man who is infatuated with love. For many men from noble families, if they fell in love with a girl from a poor family, they could take her as a concubine. Why would they worry about her? If the girl felt wronged, they could visit her more often and give her more gifts to please her. To marry a girl from a poor family, the wanderer Yan had put in a lot of effort. Fengzhen said, deep love does not last long and extreme intelligence does not last long. Yanlin's father had both, so he did not live long. A short sentence had washed away Xianxia's sorrowful feelings of spring and autumn. Did the Qiu family not react? Even if the Yan family's status wasn't high, the Qiu family was still a weakling. It was better for the two families to work together than to fight alone. Fengzhen laughed coldly. How could there be no reaction? Unfortunately for them, they were rejected by Yanlin and his son. In fact, Madame Qiu also wanted to recognize Yanlin as her grandson. Even if she couldn't, the two families could establish a friendly relationship and visit each other during the holidays. Who would have thought that Yanlin's father would fall in love with his wife? He would never allow anyone to hurt her. If she recognized Qiu as her relative, wouldn't that mean that her mother was a prostitute who had been raised by the head of Qiu's family and couldn't see the light? Xianxia nodded as he listened. He was thoroughly enjoying this big melon of the aristocratic family's scandal. He didn't expect such a good man to exist in the world. He was even rarer than a national treasure. If he were Yanlin's father, he wouldn't be able to do what he did when he was only 17 or 18 years old, even if he met a girl that he liked. It was precisely because they couldn't do it that they admired those who could. Fengzhen said, the Qiu family has been in dire straits these past few years. They don't have much money left, but their children are running away one after another. The more they have children, the poorer they are, the more they have children. Not to mention the side branches, even the main branch is doing the same. The large family has become a huge burden that they can't get rid of. On the contrary, Yanlin has become Duke Yangtao's most trusted confidant and is often entrusted with important tasks. Madame Qiu is jealous and afraid. Xianxia was confused. Afraid? Fengzhen said, afraid of silencing them. They are afraid that every day that Yanlin oppresses them, they will never have a chance to make a name for themselves. Xianxia almost laughed at Madame Qiu's words. He opened the golden fan in his hand and covered his gloating smile. I'm afraid that Yanlin doesn't care about them at all, let alone killing them. They have too many tricks up their sleeves. Xianxia knew himself very well. He knew that he and Yanlin were two different kinds of people. The former was the kind who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. He didn't care if his enemy was a noble or a commoner. If they offended him, they would have to pay the price. The latter was different. It wasn't right to say that Yanlin didn't care about anything, but he really didn't care about the barking of an ant. What was the difference between Madame Qiu and an ant in front of Yanlin? There was a huge difference in their status. If nothing went wrong, they would never meet again. How could Madame Chiu be afraid of Yanlin oppressing them? Fengzhen laughed. No matter what, despicable people like Madame Chiu are the puppets we need. It's the best way to kill people with a borrowed knife. Xianxia closed the golden fan and played with the jade pendant. Take it easy. Don't capsize. He rowed his boat not by oars but by waves. But a big wave could capsize. Didn't Fengzhen capsize once before? On the other side, the unlucky Madame Chiu, who was targeted by Fengzhen, was also uneasy. Yanlin made Fengzhen suffer a great loss. Then Fengzhen spread rumors, but it was easily resolved. In the eyes of outsiders, the whole situation was in Yang Tao's favor. This news was like a shot in the arm for Yang Tao's fans, but it was a bolt from the blue for the fence-sitters who couldn't help but join the enemy. These days, Fengzhen had been deliberately avoiding the public eye. They were even more anxious. At this time, Qiu Shi and the others had finally gotten a response from the countless favors they had gone through. The best way for gentry to keep their status and reputation was to become an official. With power, money and influence were not far away. Seeing that Yang Tao was dying, they hurriedly joined the enemy. They tried their best to find a way and recommended themselves to be put in an important position. However, Jiang Pingji's side was harder to deal with than Yang Tao's. There had been no news about her. Now that there was finally news, it should have been a good thing to be happy about, but they couldn't smile. First, the job they got was to go to the front line. It was too dangerous. They could lose their lives if they weren't careful. Second, the status of the job was too low. There was limited room for promotion. It was basically a job to send people away. Third, the scales of victory were tilted in Yang Tao's favor. They were also shaken. They questioned the correctness of their previous action of climbing the wall. They didn't know that the kind of lord was like the kind of minister. Fengzhen was also an old hand at fishing. In order to further intensify Madame Chiu's determination to defect, he secretly played many small tricks. Father, I thought Lu Shi was destined to fail. The son of the leader of the Chiu family was about to go crazy from being tortured by his superiors. He felt humiliated when he thought of the face of a villain who was intoxicated by success. Old Master Chiu asked, "Did you suffer again today?" His son felt wronged. For the past few days, his superiors had made things difficult for him, picked on him and humiliated him. He was about to collapse. Chapter 1556. If Fengzhen wanted to plot against Lady Chiu, he wouldn't do it himself, lest he expose himself. All he had to do was send someone to instruct his superiors to deliberately make things difficult for him, and that was enough to incite the other party's resentment. Qiu Shi was originally a person who was sitting on the fence. Seeing that Yang Tao's chances of winning were getting bigger and bigger, while she was being suppressed everywhere, her mentality suddenly became unbalanced. If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have spent so much effort to seek refuge with Lu Shi. Old Master Qiu's son was called Qiu Meng. Because he was an old man, he was very doted on by others. Because of this, he developed an arrogant character and could not tolerate the slightest grievance. Moreover, he was the one who had been criticized the most. One could imagine how angry he was. If I stayed with Yang Tao, at least I could secretly borrow Yanlin's power. Maybe. Before he could finish, Qiu Meng was glared at by Old Master Qiu, scaring him so much that he swallowed back whatever he was about to say. There's no turning back. What's the point of saying all this now? Old Master Qiu's hair and beard were all white. His face was old, but his skin was ruddy. One look and anyone could tell that this old man had lived an exquisite life. Father, we have to think of a way, Qiu Meng said hurriedly. Lu Shi can't defeat Yang Tao and they are in a stalemate. He will definitely withdraw his troops. Now that Yang Tao had a chance to catch his breath and recuperate for a few years, he would definitely be in a different situation. In addition, Lu Shi's subordinates were all from poor families and even commoners who were not worthy to be mentioned in public. How could they be willing to help their sons? You kept suppressing your son. How could your son endure such grievances? Old Master Qiu had been worried about this matter recently, and his son's words made him even more upset. Jiang Pingji favored the poor too much. In the eyes of the gentry, it was like squeezing the cake that belonged to the gentry. It was indeed not pleasing. The gentry had always thought of themselves as more valuable than the commoners, and it was a great humiliation for them to be on par with each other, not to mention being under someone else. Old Master Qiu said grumpily, "What do you say then? Could it be that he had to rely on Yang Tao again?" This is courting death. They had just betrayed Yang Tao and thrown themselves into the arms of the enemy. If they turned back now that the situation was not good, they would not be able to please either side. Just look at the Zhao clan. They were obviously used by others, and in the end their entire clan was annihilated. Old Master Qiu didn't dare risk it. Qiu Meng said, "Why not? If we perform a meritorious service for Yang Tao, not only will we be able to leave Luxi, but we will also be valued by Yang Tao." Old Master Qiu retorted, "How?" Qiu Meng looked around and had the servants move further away. Only then did he feel at ease to whisper in the old man's ear. The more Old Master Qiu listened, the more shocked he became. He couldn't help but ask, "Are you going to drag the entire clan down with you?" "Father, nothing ventured, nothing gained. If I stay here, I don't know when I'll be able to make a name for myself." Qiu Meng's personality was greedy and reckless. He could be considered a person blinded by greed. His every move and thought process were all within Feng Zhen's calculations. He said, "How can adding icing on the cake compare to providing timely help? As long as we help Yang Tao defeat Lu Shi, wouldn't the benefits be better than wasting our time in Lu Shi's camp?" Old Master Qiu was hesitant. Compared to his youngest son's selfish thoughts, he had more to consider. They were born and raised in Zhangzhou and naturally belonged to Yang Tao's camp, but in the end they sided with Jiang Pingji. For Yang Tao this was a betrayal. Since ancient times, which feudal lord would tolerate a fence-sitter who did not have a firm stand? Qiu Meng had also carefully considered Old Master Qiu's concern. He said, "What's there to worry about? We just need to get enough information to move Yang Tao and help him defeat Lu Shi. We can say that we sided with Lu Shi to gain her trust and make it easier for us to act. No matter how suspicious Yang Tao and the others are, they won't burn the bridge after crossing it. But even so, Yang Tao and the others won't trust us easily." No. Old Master Qiu was still hesitant, so Qiu Meng used his trump card. "Father, have you forgotten that you have a good grandson? Don't look at him for the sake of Buddha. Doesn't Yang Tao trust him the most?" The good grandson that Qiu Meng mentioned was Yan Lin. At the mention of this grandson, Old Master Qiu felt a little embarrassed. He had shamelessly proposed to recognize his grandson, but Yan Lin had rejected him directly. Yan Lin didn't even want to see him. Old Master Qiu had a temper. He had swallowed his anger and recognized the son of a concubine's daughter because he wanted Yan Lin to support his maternal family. If it wasn't for that, he wouldn't have been willing to lower his voice to the descendant of a concubine's daughter. Who would have thought that Yan Lin would go even further? Old Master Qiu was so angry that he almost died. From then on, he treated his grandson as dead and didn't want to talk about Yan Lin anymore. "Why did you mention that heartless ingrate?" Old Master Qiu was furious. Qiu Meng had to use his silver tongue to persuade the old man. Was a moment of pride more important than the family? Of course it was the family. Everything was within Feng Zhen's calculations. It went so smoothly that it was unbelievable. Xianxia wasn't surprised at all because he had seen through the Qiu father and son. Rather than saying that Feng Zhen had set them up for death, it was more accurate to say that their ambition had pushed them into a dead end. The Qiu family was different from the Zhao family. When the Zhao family sought refuge with Jiang Pingji, they brought their entire family with them. Only the main members of the Qiu family had come. Therefore it was more convenient for Qiu Meng to send a message back. "What's this?" Xianxia said, "My lord, someone threw it here on purpose." Yang Tao read the letter over and over again and said, "It was signed by Qiu Meng. Do you know him?" Of course, Xianxia had read the letter. He had investigated Qiu Meng in advance and was surprised to find that he had already sought refuge with Jiang Pingji. Yang Tao laughed. "That's interesting. He's under Lu Shi's wing, but he's still flirting with me. His stance isn't firm." Xianxia said, "What a greedy person." Yang Tao said, "Qiu Meng said that they're pretending to seek refuge with Lu Shi. Do you think that's believable?" "I don't believe it anyway. Such a clumsy trick. Did they really think that he didn't have a brain?" Qiu Meng also knew that he wouldn't be able to win Yang Tao's trust if he confessed openly, so he quickly wrote another letter. Yang Tao stared blankly at the second letter. He wondered, the Qiu family is Xiaoyang's maternal family? I've never heard of it. Qianxia also sneered. Maybe they're just trying to claim relatives. Even so, Yang Tao still sent someone to ask Yan Lin, who was at the mouth of the river. Yan Lin's expression changed as soon as he read the letter. He quickly wrote a reply. As a junior, Yanlin couldn't tell Yang Tao all the secrets of his elders, even if he was the lord. He briefly told Yang Tao about the conflict between him and the Qiu family. Many parts were vague and Yang Tao didn't want to get to the bottom of it. Yang Tao then asked Yanlin, "Can this person be trusted?" Yanlin pondered for a long time and carefully analyzed Qiu Meng's personality. He said, "Most likely. Qiu Meng is blinded by greed. He probably saw that Lu Shi didn't put him in an important position, so he felt unbalanced and wanted to turn back." Yang Tao could tell that Qiu Meng wanted to use Jiang Pingji and Yanlin as a stepping stone. "Although it's true, we still have to be cautious. My lord, just believe half of it." Chapter 1557. Judging from Xiaoyang's reply, his relationship with the Qiu family is quite bad. Yang Tao curiously read the reply several times and sighed to his wife. "Speaking of which, I don't seem to have heard Madame mention anything about maternal family. Is there a secret here?" Zhou Xian was playing with her son, who was getting fatter and more energetic. Hearing this, she couldn't help but raise her head to refute. "Husband, you're wrong. I don't have a proper maternal family. Of course I can't mention it." Zhou Xian held her heavy son in one hand and shook the rattle drum with the other. Listening to the sound of the beads hitting the drum, the little guy in her arms stared at it without blinking, revealing his baby teeth. Seeing this, Zhou Xian smiled warmly. "Speaking of which, that's the matter of the previous 2 generations." Yang Tao was surprised. Listening to Madame's words, the relationship between the Qiu family and the Yan family wasn't as superficial as bad. "Madame, is it convenient for you to reveal something?" Xiaoyang also said something, but the content wasn't clear. Yang Tao was a little embarrassed, as if he was ashamed of his curiosity. Zhou Xian said, "You and I are one. We're a family, so there's nothing to hide." She briefly talked about the love and hatred of the previous 2 generations, with an indescribable sadness in her tone. "I heard that maternal grandmother was once a famous peerless beauty. Unfortunately, her life was wandering and she didn't have a good end in the end." Zhou Xian sighed. "Whether it's prosperous times or troubled times, it's always harder for women to survive than others. Old Master Qiu kept a courtesan outside as a mistress. Other than her face and body, what else could he want? A woman's best years were too short. Just like a blooming peony, there would be a day when it withered. When one grew old, one's appearance was gone. Not to mention keeping a man's heart, one couldn't even keep his body. Maternal grandmother was a typical example. Maternal grandmother had been a mistress for several years. At first, because she was still young, she was doted on. But after giving birth, her figure was out of shape, and her face wasn't as fresh and tender as when she was young. That fickle man got tired of her and gradually stopped paying attention to her. Her maternal grandmother had been raised as a talented woman since she was a child, but she had a delicate heart of sorrow in the secular world. She gradually became depressed as her man alienated her and finally passed away. Yan Shushua's mother had inherited her mother's good looks. She was famous for her beauty even before she reached marriageable age. Because she was the daughter of a wealthy merchant, her status was not high. As a result, many aristocratic families who coveted her beauty had lusted after her. If Yanlin's father hadn't fallen in love with her at first sight and spent so much effort to marry her, he wouldn't have ended up well. Don't forget, in this era, concubines could be used as gifts by the male masters to entertain guests. As someone else's concubine, if she didn't receive her husband's favor, she would have to go through all of this. Yang Tao listened attentively, one hand clenched into a fist and pounded the palm of the other, as if he had discovered some great secret. "No wonder. At first I was wondering why Uncle Yan's appearance was so ordinary, but how could his children be so beautiful and elegant? So this is the reason." Indeed, the parents' looks were still very important. Their children's looks were guaranteed. Yang Tao looked at his son carefully, as if trying to imagine how elegant he would be when he grew up. After a while, he said with certainty, "Madam, I was born so beautiful, and you are also the most beautiful woman in the world. When our son grows up, he will definitely be full of beauties when he goes out." Yan Shushue was speechless. Was this the main point? "As long as you're happy," Yang Tao said. "In that case, the Qiu family isn't a good thing either." Yan Shushue said, "It's not appropriate for me to interfere with the political affairs outside. Everything is up to you." Yang Tao said, "There's a guy named Qiu Meng in the Qiu family. He said that he defected to Lu Shi in order to cheat him of his secrets. Now that he has made progress, he plans to cooperate with me. I didn't want to believe him at first, but since he is related to Xiaoyang, I can trust him. Yan Shushu asked curiously, why? Is it because of eldest brother? Yang Tao said, I sent Qian Su to inquire, but no one knows about the relationship between the Qiu family and Xiaoyang. No one on Lu Shi's side knows either. From this, it's true that the Qiu family defected to Lu Shi, but it's also true that they plan to slip away and help us cooperate with him. Because there were too few people who knew about this old grudge, Yang Tao couldn't find out anything even after asking around. It was even more impossible for Fengzhen to know. Unbeknownst to them, the legend of the top courtesan was only occasionally talked about by the older generation in brothels, and the new generation strived for it. Who would have thought that Fengzhen knew? Yang Tao continued, however, since Xiaoyang said that we can only trust half of the Qiu family's words, let's wait and see. Yan Shushua said curiously, I heard from eldest brother that most of the Qiu family are good-for-nothings. Not many of them are presentable. They defected to Lu Shi. With their abilities, how can they get a good position? In this case, their help to Lang Jun is limited. Yang Tao said, Qiu Meng is indeed useless. After defecting to Lu Shi, his position is also low, but it doesn't mean that he is useless. Yan Shushua didn't understand. Is there such a thing? Yang Tao said, of course there is. Even though Qiu Meng is only a small registrar in charge of returning rations to the warehouse, isn't war all about fighting for rations? He was in dire need of rations. If not for Qiu Meng's letter, Yang Tao would have sent someone to borrow rations from Enchui. Enchui was a jackal while Jiang Pingji was a tiger. Neither of them was easy to deal with. However, there was a saying that the enemy of an enemy was an ally. Jiang Pingji was powerful and both Enchui and Yang Tao were thorns in her eyes. With the common threat of a foreign enemy, they formed a natural alliance. Yan Shushua obviously knew her husband's predicament. She smiled and said, if that's the case, our army's rations crisis can be solved. Yang Tao said, it's too early to say that. The Qiu family. Let's wait and see. If we can trust them, we'll do something big. Yan Shushua said, it's better to be safe than sorry. Langjun, it's not wrong to be cautious. At that moment, the fat son in her arms suddenly began to struggle unhappily. His little face scrunched up and he punched wildly, looking fierce. Seeing that, Yang Tao immediately carried his son away. I'll hold him first, lest he wet your dress again. Before he finished his sentence, a dripping yellow liquid leaked out from the diaper, and the fierce little face also relaxed. I've never seen anyone with such a bad temper. If Yang Tao didn't have some family wealth, he probably wouldn't even be able to provide for his son's diaper. Yan Shushua couldn't help but laugh. Her dress wasn't wet, but her husband's clothes were unlucky. Yang Tao left his son to the wet nurse to change his diaper, and he went into the bedroom to change into a clean set of clothes. My lord, there's an urgent letter. When Yang Tao came out after changing, the housekeeper of the manor handed him a confidential letter. He opened it and saw that it was a message from Qiu Meng. Qian Su asked, my lord, do you want? Chapter 1558. Yang Tao was calm, so was Fengzhen. Qiu Meng was the only one who couldn't. He paced back and forth like an ant on a hot pan the whole night. He waited from dusk until dawn. Once again he asked the servant for information. He didn't expect Yang Tao to not send troops to intercept the grain. Old Master Qiu wasn't surprised. Instead he scolded his youngest son. Yang Tao is one of the feudal lords. Look at those top-notch feudal lords. Which one of them is heartless? Old Master Qiu lectured his youngest son earnestly. Seeing him humbly ask for advice, he felt great satisfaction. He continued, no matter what, even if we have a relationship with Yanlin, it's not enough to completely win Yang Tao's trust. He will definitely wait and see for a while. Qiu Meng was dissatisfied. I know this too. But Yang Tao doesn't know how much risk I have to take to send him a message. The bigger the movement, the easier it was to be discovered. Once they were discovered, the Zhao family would be a good example. He risked his life to send Yang Tao information. Every opportunity was precious. Who would have thought that Yang Tao would still be so hesitant? Old Master Qiu shook his head. This is why other people are feudal lords, but you are still a step away from being outstanding. If you don't have some vigilance, you won't survive 3 episodes, understand? Qiu Meng was annoyed, but he didn't dare to talk back. He still needed this old man's support. After a while, Chiu Meng sent 2 more messages to Yang Tao, both of which were true. Because Chiu Meng was only a junior registrar, he was responsible for the first step of the inventory of the grain. At most, he knew where the grain fleet would pass, but he didn't know which granary the grain would end up in. He wanted to know more information, so he had to ask around in private. In order not to arouse the suspicion of his superiors, Chiu Meng took great pains. Little did he know that all of this was happening under Feng Zhen's eyes. Fu Wang was a little puzzled. Is Yang Tao unwilling to take the bait? Or did he become suspicious? Feng Zhen said, "It's unlikely, but his appetite is too big. It's true that he wants to eat until he's fat." After enduring for so long, Yang Tao must be able to keep his composure, Yang Si said. Then shall we send more people to send tens of thousands more grain next time? Feng Zhen smiled as he toyed with the object in his hand. His gaze was playful. Wait a little longer. Now is not the time, Feng Zhen said. Also, send more people to guard the Jingyang granary. Fu Wang was puzzled. Why? Could it be that their target was the Jingyang granary? Chiu Meng can't get this information. Feng Zhen said, why can't I get it? Yang Tao and the others were born and raised in Zhangzhou. Our army had used different water routes to transport the grain several times, but the enemy could roughly determine which nearby places were more suitable to store the grain according to these routes. Yang Tao is able to keep his composure. Firstly, it's because Wan Shi's grain isn't enough to attract him. Secondly, he wants to find our granary and burn it all in one go. Fu Wang could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. I never expected Yang Tao to be so scheming. Feng Zhen said, don't underestimate anyone. No matter how outspoken Yang Tao is, he has been with Yan Lin for more than 20 years. As the saying goes, one is marked by the company one keeps. Even a pure white rabbit would be dyed black by ink. Yang Si laughed. Maybe you're thinking too much. Feng Zhen said, it's always good to be well prepared and cautious. Yang Si laughed in his heart. Once bitten, twice shy. Even a prodigal son like him would have such a day. On the surface, it seemed calm, but in reality there were surging undercurrents. Both Feng Zhen and Yang Tao were secretly testing each other's limits, waiting for the best time to strike. As a chess piece in the game between the two sides, Chiu Meng felt like he was playing with the 2 feudal powers in the palm of his hand. On this day he delivered another piece of important news to Yang Tao. He said as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders, if Yang Tao can't even grasp this piece of news, then he can forget about fighting for the world. He should just admit defeat. Why did he say that? Because there were 100,000 dawn of grain this time. Because the amount was too large. In order to prevent any accidents, the military counselor Yang Si personally led the troops to escort it. This was the most confidential of secrets. Chiu Meng had used money to get the information out of the mouth of his drunken colleague. If Yang Tao was willing to launch a sneak attack on the grain team, not only could they seize 100,000 dawn of grain, but they could also capture Yang Si, one of Lu Shi's right-hand men. Yang Si had a good reputation in the southern territories. Capturing him and using him as a sacrifice would definitely deal a heavy blow to the enemy's morale. Why do I have to go too? Yang Si waved his golden fan, looking impatient. He wasn't Feng Zhen, he didn't like to court death so much. Feng Zhen said, if you don't go as bait, I'm afraid that Yang Tao will ignore the grain and go directly to the Jingyang granary. Yang Si spat and said, if you want to court death, go yourself. Why drag me down with you? Feng Zhen smiled and said, we'll share blessings and misfortunes together. When it comes to making a name for ourselves, you'll naturally benefit as well. Yang Si was speechless. He had seen shameless people, but he had never seen someone who could use his colleague as bait and still make such a solemn vow. How shameless. What about you? Yang Si asked him. Feng Zhen smiled and said, of course I'll guard the Jingyang granary. Maybe Yang Tao, like my lord, likes to take the lead. If that's the case, we'll benefit greatly. Yang Si rolled his eyes. If Yang Tao was as troublesome as his lord, he didn't believe that Yan Lin would still indulge Yang Tao. Why did you choose that night to make your move? Yang Si asked another question, looking like he wanted to get to the bottom of the matter. I saw that you've been reading the stars these days. Could it be that you've learned from that quack Wei Zixiao and can predict the weather and the direction of the wind? I was born and raised in Zhangzhou. Do I need to know how to predict the weather? Wei Zixiao is a quack, but I'm not. Feng Zhen suddenly smiled evilly. Why did you choose that day to make your move? Because there will be thick fog on the river that day. It'll be perfect for our army to launch a sneak attack from the south, using the Jingyang granary and the transport team to attract Yang Tao's attention, then taking advantage of the thick fog to launch a sneak attack on his army. It was killing two birds with one stone. Xianxia was speechless. He was starting to doubt whether Yanlin had tricked Fengzhen this time, or had he dug up the graves of all his ancestors. This was too sinister. Was he planning to destroy Yang Tao's base in one fell swoop? What a beast. He thought that Fengzhen's use of his comrades as bait was already the bottom line. He didn't expect that he would even use the Jingyang granary as bait. On the other side, just as Fengzhen had predicted, Yang Tao accurately guessed the location of the granary based on the information he received. At this time, Yanlin, who had been training at the mouth of the river, returned. Xiang, you're back at the right time. Yanlin said, I heard that my lord plans to lead the army yourself. His voice wasn't loud, but Yang Tao couldn't help but cower. I'm worried about the generals. Before he could finish his sentence, Yanlin interrupted, Generals have their duties. If they can't fight for my lord, what's the use of them? Are the generals so useless that my lord needs to lead the army herself? Yang Tao's words were stuck in his throat. He said gloomily, If that's the case, should I lead the army? Yanlin asked him with his eyes. What do you think? Yang Tao was speechless. Chapter 1559. Xiaoyang, what are you planning to do? Yanlin stopped him, so Yang Tao gave up on the idea of leading the army. Unexpectedly, Yanlin put on his armor, which was rare. Yanlin said, I will lead the army to intercept the food. Xianxia is cunning. We can't let him get away so easily. Yang Tao felt wronged. His friend didn't want him to lead the army, so he went alone. I've known Xiaoyang for so many years, but you've never dressed like this before. Yang Tao and Yanlin grew up together. They were not biological brothers, but they were as close as real brothers. They knew each other very well. Even though Yanlin always wore a scholarly robe and looked like a gentleman, it didn't mean that the sword on his waist was just a decoration. Only a few people knew that even Yang Tao, a powerful warrior, had to be on high alert when fighting with Yanlin. Otherwise he might lose. If Yang Tao wasn't so troublesome, Yanlin would rather be a scholarly general than a counselor. He wouldn't have to clean up Yang Tao's messes like this. If Yanlin hadn't put on his armor, even Yang Tao would have forgotten what he looked like in it. The armor that Yanlin was wearing was not brand new. There were traces of battle on it, and it gave off a fierce aura. Perhaps because of the armor, Yanlin's gentleness had been diluted. Instead, he looked more heroic. Hearing Yang Tao's words, Yanlin couldn't help but sigh. He didn't wear this armor often. Who is it for? If Yang Tao could save him some trouble, he would also be willing to go into battle in leather armor and become a general who opened up new territories, rather than a strategist who stayed in the rear to give advice. Of course, this wasn't a bad thing. To Yanlin, nothing was more important than Yang Tao's safety. Master, it's getting dark. We can go now. At this moment, a soldier outside reminded the two of them. Yanlin glanced at the darkening sky outside and couldn't help but say, My lord, guard the rear. Keep an eye out. Yang Tao asked, Can they send troops to attack our water stockade? Yanlin retorted, Why not? It would be best if they could successfully intercept Lu Shi's rations. But if they couldn't, then they would have to burn them all down. Once the fire started, the enemy would definitely take action. If they can't save the granary in time, they can mobilize their troops to attack our water stockade. It can be considered a strategy of besieging Wei to rescue Zhao. Therefore, my lord cannot let down her guard tonight. Pay more attention. Yang Tao understood. He had always trusted his partner's words, so he naturally had no objections. All right. I will increase the number of patrols to prevent the enemy from taking advantage of the situation. Xiaoyang should also be careful, don't play around with your life. Yanlin valued Yang Tao, and Yang Tao valued his friends as well. I'll prepare a banquet here and await your triumphant return. Yanlin cupped his fists and said, Yes, sir. The army was divided into two groups. They had long since made preparations and were only waiting for the order to pull the anchor and set sail. The wind is blowing from the southeast tonight. It looks like even God is willing to help our army. Yanlin was sitting on the deck trying to calm himself down. Beside him, two vice-admirals were whispering to each other. Other than the soft chatter and the sound of the oars, there was only the sound of the southeast wind blowing against his clothes. Most of the soldiers under Yang Tao's command were good at swimming. They all grew up near the water and knew the area very well. One of the vice-admirals was a native of the area. His family had been fishermen for generations and they relied on God for their livelihood. Because his ancestors and parents had always taken him out to fish, he had learned a lot from them. Looking at the sky, he said, "It's not just the southeast wind. Maybe there will be fog on the river at around midnight tonight." Even though the fog would affect the sailing of the ships, it also served as a cover. The soldiers at the helm were all locals who were familiar with the area. They wouldn't get lost even if they closed their eyes, let alone the fog. In comparison, Jiang Pingji's soldiers were not as familiar with the river. Once the fog came, they would be like headless flies. Is there really going to be fog at midnight? The other vice-admiral was obviously not as experienced as the other vice-admiral. At that moment, Yan Lin, who had been meditating with his eyes closed, opened his mouth. "Yes, there will be fog. But judging from the weather, there will probably be some rain after midnight." For people who relied on the water for their livelihood, especially fishermen, it was a basic skill to distinguish the flow of the river and predict the weather to avoid hunting in stormy weather. Even though Zhangzhou's shipbuilding technology was not bad, humans were as weak as ants in the face of nature. The vice-admiral was also surprised. He didn't expect Yan Lin, who was from an aristocratic family, to be so good at this. "If it drizzles after midnight, then our plan." Yan Lin wasn't worried. They planned to make their move before midnight and the rain after midnight. There was no conflict of time. When the rain came, the food that needed to be burned would be gone, and the food that needed to be taken would be taken. It wouldn't affect the overall plan at all. At the same time, Yangxi was bitterly being used as bait by Feng Zhen. "I really don't know what Feng Longzi is thinking. Did I steal his food or drink? How could he treat me like this?" Yangxi couldn't help but sigh. He kept complaining to Feng Zhen, "Do you think I'll be able to lure Yan Xiaoyang here with me as bait?" The vice-admiral who was protecting Yangxi couldn't help but laugh, but he couldn't. It was painful to hold it in. When his cheeks were sore, the vice-admiral suppressed his laughter and said, "If we can really lure him here, the military counselor will have made a great contribution." Everyone knew how important Yan Lin was to Yang Tao. If they could capture Yang Tao's #1 subordinate, the enemy's morale would plummet. Yangxi laughed. "It's easier to dream about this." The vice-admiral knew that Yangxi wasn't arrogant. As long as he didn't cross the line, Yangxi didn't mind joking a little. "I remember that the military counselor said that he wanted to make more contributions and save more dowry for his daughter." Speaking of which, it was strange. They had never heard of the single military advisor Yangxi getting married, but everyone knew that he had a daughter. Yangxi said, "They changed the dowry." The vice-admiral was speechless. Yangxi said gloomily, "My son's mother decided it. How can I go against her?" The vice-admiral said, "The dowry is not bad. The military counselor's daughter can't wash hands and cook for others like ordinary girls." Because the status of female soldiers in the army was getting more and more important, many soldiers had changed their view of women. They didn't dare to underestimate them. As one of the Lord's confidants, Yangxi's child would also be an official in the future. His status wouldn't be low, so his marriage couldn't be like that of ordinary girls. Yangxi was even more gloomy. "My son's mother told me not to worry about this. She's wealthier than me. I can only hope to have another son." Jiang Nongqing was a general who led troops to war. She didn't need too many rewards and spoils of war. Yangxi couldn't even catch up to her family. She was obviously biased towards her daughter. She said that the eldest daughter had to follow her household register and her surname. In the future, when she had a son, her son would continue the family line for Yangxi. What else could Yangxi say? Of course he would follow her. Yangxi didn't even have a wedding. How could he object? Chapter 1560. "Sai, let's not talk about these sad things. The more we talk, the sadder we get." Yangxi waved his hand and motioned for Si to skip this slightly painful topic. Smacking his lips, Yangxi felt a little thirsty and asked the deputy general, "Is there any wine in the cabin?" The general smiled and said, "How can I drink in front of a battle? Even if I support the military counselor, I can't break the law knowingly, can I? But there are a few baskets of lychees which were picked yesterday. I heard that they are late-ripening fruits with small pits and a lot of pulp. Military advisor, do you want to try them?" Lychees were very rare. Although they were produced in large quantities, They were not easy to preserve. People living in the north rarely had the chance to eat such a delicacy. Even if one could eat it, the value of a single lychee was worth 1,000 taels of gold. For example, one could dig out the entire lychee tree and use a boat to travel north. It required a lot of manpower and resources, and ordinary families could not afford it at all. Of course, lychees were not expensive in the lychee production area. Xianxia laughed and said, "You're so smart. Why haven't I heard of lychees being delivered?" Jiang ordered his men to bring the basket of lychees over. The skin of the lychees was bright red and there were scales protruding out. The quality was excellent. "There are a lot of lychees in my hometown. My parents once planted them for the local rich." Jiang smiled and said, "Ever since I followed my lord, my parents, wife and children have been living a better life. With the money I sent back, I bought more than 10 acres of lychee trees. It just so happens that this place is not far from my hometown. It would take 3 to 4 days to travel by land, but it would only take a little more than a day to travel by water along the river." Jiang was an honest man. He also knew how powerful his military advisor was. Hiding it from him would be courting death. Perhaps he would be disliked instead of pleasing him. He said, "I heard that the military advisor likes these things, so I asked my parents to pick some and send them over." When Xianxia was young, he traveled around to study, so he naturally went to the lychee production area to eat. This thing was really delicious. "How many baskets are there in the cabin?" Xianxia looked at the lychees. Each one was plump and attractive. It was obvious that they had been carefully selected and chilled using special methods to keep them fresh. He picked one up and his fingertips were cold. As a cultured foodie, Xianxia peeled lychees differently from others. Jiang used his fingernails to peel off the outer layer bit by bit. Not only was it easy to dirty his hands, but the lychee water would also stick to his hands, making it dirty. He directly used his index finger and thumb to pinch the tip of the lychee, and used a little strength along the line of the lychee shell. With an extremely light sound, the outer shell of the lychee split open along the line, revealing the sparkling and translucent congealed flesh. The deputy general was still peeling and Xianxia had already eaten 2. "I've sent 15 baskets. Does the military advisor want one?" Seeing that Xianxia was quick and clean, Jiang imitated his movements, and sure enough, it was much easier. Cultured people were indeed cultured people. They were more particular about peeling lychees than ordinary people, and they also looked cleaner. So many. Xianxia thought about the lychees he had eaten during his study tour. The production of lychees was indeed not low. He smiled and said, "Leave a basket for Feng Longzi, General Fu, and the rest for the soldiers. How much are the lychees worth? You can report it to me." The deputy general said, "It's homegrown. It's not worth much." "That won't do. Nothing can be accomplished without rules." Xianxia said, "If the Lord knew, she wouldn't agree." Although it was homegrown, it didn't take time and energy to take care of the lychee tree. As the military advisor, he couldn't take advantage of his own soldiers. The generals in troubled times were all professions that put their lives on the line, so they couldn't be treated harshly. The deputy general couldn't dissuade Xianxia, so he could only accept his good intentions. Xianxia sent soldiers to distribute the few baskets of lychees to each ship, and after sharing them, each person only had one. He remembered that Xieze was also here, so he specially sent someone to give a small portion to Xieze. "If there are still lychees after this battle, let's go eat to our heart's content." The deputy general smiled and said, "If so, then I really thank the military advisor on behalf of the local people." Lychees were indeed rare, but not many people could afford to eat them. The annual production was relatively high, so there wasn't much market for lychees in the local area. They could be sold for a higher price in other places, but this thing wasn't easy to preserve, and the cost of preservation and transportation was frighteningly high. Xianxia looked a little thin, but his appetite was not small. If it weren't for the fact that lychees were warm in nature, he would have eaten so much that he had to support the wall. Not long after, a small pile of lychee shells and pits had piled up on the deck. Time passed quickly, as if it was flying through one's fingers. Some fog slowly began to gather on the surface of the river. Xianxia said, "Feng Longzi was right. Speak of fog and there will be fog. Order the entire army to be vigilant in case the enemy comes." The deputy general immediately passed on the message. "Military advisor, everything is ready." Xieze wasn't on the same ship as Xianxia, but he wasn't far away, so he could hear him if he raised his voice. Xianxia said, Yes, tell General Xie to be ready to defend against the enemy at any time. He didn't have a loud voice like Xie's, so he could only let the deputy general pass the message on his behalf. If Yanlin and the others were here, they would find that there was something wrong with these ships that were transporting provisions. First of all, the appearance of the ships. Ordinary warships were the color of the wood, but Yangxi's ships were painted black. As for the ships, there was a thick and long hemp rope tied between each ship. One had to know that in order to ensure the mobility of naval battles and prevent the enemy from setting fire to everything, ships were usually not connected to each other. Did Yangxi make a fundamental mistake? Actually, it wasn't. Yangxi made this arrangement with a profound meaning. Today was the night of the first lunar month, and the night was extremely dark. There was a heavy fog at midnight, which could easily interfere with the enemy's vision. To ensure that the fleet's formation didn't fall apart, they were temporarily connected with thick hemp ropes. If the enemy needed to change the formation, they could cut off the ropes at any time. In addition, they had painted the surface of the ships black, which almost blended into the night and the river. If there was another heavy fog, not only would the enemy not be able to find them, they wouldn't even be able to find themselves. It was always more convenient to be connected with ropes. The grain and supply fleet followed the original route. As time went by, everyone's nerves were stretched into a tight line. They were constantly worried that the enemy would suddenly jump out. The deputy general said, "Military advisor, it's getting late. You should go into the cabin and take a rest." If the enemy came out, they would definitely attack with arrows. If Yangxi stayed on the deck, he would be easily injured. Yangxi squinted his eyes dangerously. He put his index finger on his lips, signaling the deputy general to be quiet. "Tell General Xie that if I'm right, the enemy will definitely ambush us in the water ahead." The deputy general couldn't speak loudly this time, so he used semaphore. Since the two ships weren't too far away, they could just barely make out the semaphore message. At the same time, Yanlin and the others were also on standby. Half an hour had passed and the fog was getting thicker. Yanlin held the hilt of his sword with his left hand and frowned. Still not coming? Just then he vaguely saw something floating on the water. Yanlin immediately ordered his men to fish for it with a fishing pole covered with a net. "Lychee shell," the general said. "How can there be something like this on the river?" Yanlin said, "The enemy is coming. Order the soldiers to prepare for battle." Chapter 1561. Of course, Yangxi didn't spill the shells into the river, but the soldiers didn't notice and spat them into the river. Not only did they warn the enemy, but they also misled them into thinking that Yangxi and the others were unprepared. After all, who would eat lychees when they were preparing for war? Were they overestimating themselves or underestimating the enemy? The deputy general said angrily, "These people are underestimating us." Yanlin sneered and threw the shells back into the river. "It's better not to underestimate them. They'll be worried if they're on guard." As time went by, the fog became thicker and the visibility decreased. Yanlin sent some soldiers to sail along the river and followed the direction the lychee shells came from, but they couldn't find any trace of the enemy. The soldier came back soon and reported to Yanlin. Yanlin was surprised. "No trace of the enemy? How come?" Yanlin recalled the lychee shells. The cracks were very fresh, so they must have been peeled not long ago. Judging by the time they drifted, the enemy should be nearby. How come they didn't find them? Something was wrong. While he was thinking, the soldier on the front noticed something was wrong. There seemed to be a dark shadow in the fog. The soldier rubbed his eyes, thinking that he was hallucinating. But when he looked again, the shadow didn't seem to be there. What was going on? Was it a ghost ship? The people who lived near the water would always hear their elders talking about the stories of monsters related to the water, especially in the water areas where water battles had taken place. There would always be fishermen who returned from fishing saying that they saw the shadows of the two armies fighting, and they could also hear the faint shouts of killing. When one person started the rumor would get more and more exaggerated. Eventually, it would become the so-called legend of the monsters. Obviously, this soldier was also one of the people who was poisoned by the stories. But soon he didn't have to worry about it anymore. As the shadow got closer, they could see it more clearly. It wasn't a ghost. It was the silhouette of a battleship. But it was too dark for them to see it clearly. When they saw it clearly, the enemy's battleship was very close to them. It was still speeding up. Before the first battleship could give the order to shoot, the enemy's battleship had already rammed into them. The ship shook violently and made a muffled sound. Enemy attack. The soldier shouted loudly. At the same time he shot a flaming arrow into the sky, making a sharp, ear-piercing sound. Xianxia laughed. The military counselor really has a lot of clever ideas. With the hull of the ship dyed this color, the enemy didn't notice us until they were so close. With that, the warship crashed into the enemy again. The soldiers took the opportunity to throw the anchor onto the enemy's deck and rushed over. Water battles were mainly fought with bows and arrows. The soldiers used shields to block the arrows thrown from the enemy, while the archers used arrows or ignited fire arrows to shoot at the enemy's warships. The advance and retreat of the ships were all controlled by specialized boatmen. His lord had also brainstormed with the carpentry workshop and Navy Chief Commander Qi Kuang to design a heavy hammer that was specially used to smash the hull of the enemy's warships. Coupled with the shipbuilding skills offered by Mountain Ghost, their warships could be said to be armed to the teeth. Its defense was extremely good and its destructive power was extremely strong. What it was least afraid of was a one-on-one confrontation. Because the enemy's ship was close to theirs, Xianxia immediately ordered the soldiers to smash the pendulums at the enemy. The enemy's first warship was brutally rammed several times. As soon as the pendulums were thrown, the hull of the ship let out an ear-piercing screech and a big hole suddenly appeared. Not long after the vanguard warship clashed, their own soldiers rushed to the enemy's deck and killed a group of them. Xianxia and his men had the upper hand, but Yanlin's reaction was extremely fast. Countless fire arrows dyed with burning oil were shot at them. This is an ambush? Yanlin's face was filled with shock. His eyes were filled with terrifying whirlpools. He didn't panic. Instead, he immediately ordered the soldiers to prepare for a counterattack. First, they would use the fire arrows to force the enemy to retreat. The deputy general also said, "Military counselor, we have fallen into the enemy's trap." Yanlin's face darkened. He didn't need the deputy general to remind him. Not only was there an ambush here, but there might also be an ambush at the granary in Jingyang, or at the water stockade. Thinking of this, Yanlin couldn't help but clench his fists. He gritted his teeth and his masseter muscles. His anger was about to burst out. Chiu. He didn't know if Feng Zhen and Yang Si had used her, or if she was in cahoots with them to set Yang Tao up. Either way, he wouldn't forgive Chiu. Don't panic. Just listen to my orders and force them to retreat. Yanlin's voice seemed to have the power to calm people down, making them feel safe. However, only Yanlin himself knew that since the enemy had spent so much time and effort to set up this trap, they must have come prepared. At the same time, something similar happened at the granary in Jingyang. To prevent any accidents, Yanlin arranged for an old general to lead a sneak attack on the granary in Jingyang. This old general was also Yang Jian's old subordinate. He had fought with Yang Jian for many years and was very loyal to him. Not only was he loyal, but this old general was also humble and low-key. He would never rely on his seniority to learn from others and was not ashamed to take advantage of his seniority. Yanlin knew that he was steady and experienced, so he gave him the responsibility of the sneak attack. This old general didn't let Yanlin down. As soon as he approached the granary in Jingyang, he noticed that something was wrong. Pass down the order. Everyone is to be on high alert. This old man feels that something is not quite right here. The young general who was assisting the old general said, "It looks normal. I didn't expect Lu Shi to set up the granary here." The waters around Jingyang were complicated. It was easy to hide, easy to transport, and close to the enemy's base camp. It was indeed safe. The old general said, "What do you know? I feel that something is wrong with the air above the granary. I don't feel at ease." The young general was upset. How could there be such a saying in a war? Despite his suspicions, the old general didn't order a retreat. Instead, he told his soldiers to be extra careful. When they killed the soldiers on night watch and rushed into the granary, the old general felt more and more uneasy. "Old general, this is not grain. It's all hay and black oil." The old general's face twitched. He shouted, "Retreat. There's an ambush." As soon as he finished speaking, the soldiers who had been lying in ambush crawled out of the ground and charged in from all directions. The thirsty archers fired arrows at the enemy and some aimed at the dry wood and hay. "Retreat now? Tisk tisk tisk. It's too late." Feng Zhen opened his gold-sprinkled fan in a flirtatious manner. The fan covered half of his face, revealing only a pair of eyes that were filled with intrigue. The weather was hot and humid in Zhangzhou. Coupled with the screams of the soldiers, it was unbearably hot. Only the cool breeze could make him feel better. An eye for an eye. You made me suffer and now I'll take it back. The two groups of soldiers didn't hurt Yang Tao much, but... Chapter 1562. Fu Wang felt his nose itch and sneezed loudly. Qi Kuang thought he had caught a cold. The river is windy outside. Why don't General Fu go into the cabin to avoid the wind? Qi Kuang suggested gently with sincerity written all over his face. This made Fu Wang a little depressed because he didn't like to bully honest people. Why would a man be afraid of this little wind? I wonder who was talking about me just now. Fu Wang sneezed a few more times after he finished speaking. The tip of his nose was itchy and warm as if his blood had rushed there. He guessed, maybe it's the two precious babies talking about their Aweng. Aweng was a respectful title for a grandfather, father or father-in-law. In the previous dynasty, people used this colloquial term, but it wasn't popular anymore. However, some small places still kept this tradition. Huiyun was also affected. When she taught the twins to speak, she taught them to call Fu Wang, Aweng. The children learned quickly. When Fu Wang heard the children call him that, all his grievances disappeared. Not necessarily. Look at the time now. The children should have gone to bed long ago. Qi Kuang was an honest man. Without hesitation he shattered Fu Wang's fantasy and said straightforwardly, I, on the other hand, think that it's more likely that Advisor Feng and Advisor Yang are talking about you. What do you think? Fu Wang spat and said in disdain, these two old foxes are probably up to no good when they talk about me. Qi Kuang smiled. I think the two military advisors are good people. They treat their subordinates kindly and rarely make things difficult for others. Civil officials and military generals rarely got along because their worldviews were different and their areas of expertise were different. Military generals felt that civil officials only knew how to talk glibly and were annoying. They liked to show off when they had a bit of knowledge in their stomachs and liked to retreat when faced with difficult matters. They didn't have the spirit to work. Civil officials also felt that military generals weren't good. For example, they didn't use their brains when encountering problems, acted rashly and dealt with things with violence. They fought and killed without thinking. In short, they were nitpicking. No matter how good they were, they would still make mistakes. These two groups had many conflicts and infiltrated each other. Thus, it was difficult for them to get along. Qi Kuang felt that he was very lucky. The people he worked with were all good-tempered and understanding. They didn't deliberately make things difficult for others. Fu Wang could be said to have seen through this conclusion. What's the point? Two old foxes. When scheming against others, they wouldn't even know how they schemed against them. Fu Wang had clearly expressed his disdain, but that was only in private and would not affect his official duties. Qi Kuang said, could it be that General has suffered losses before? Fu Wang said, of course I have. Every time I think about it, I feel that the two of them are extremely detestable. Qi Kuang was even more puzzled. Fu Wang was a loner by nature and had an unruly personality, but he didn't like to cause trouble and offend people. How did he and Xianxia become enemies? How did they become enemies? It was like a child without a mother. It was a long story. Fu Wang did not intend to be a commander. He wanted to recommend Li Yun or Xieze and take the time to arrange his marriage with Huiyun. That's right, Fu Wang had shamelessly pestered Huiyun for so many years, and he had finally convinced Huiyun to agree. For this, he had even signed a series of unfair treaties. Unexpectedly, at the last moment, Xianxia and the other man put Fu Wang on the fire to roast. He had become the commander of the expedition against Yang Tao, not an ordinary general. The matters at hand were not of the same level, and he had squeezed out all of Fu Wang's wedding time. If it was a coincidence, it would have been fine. But these two people were sincere, so Fu Wang could not be blamed for gnashing his teeth. Let's not talk about these two old foxes. Mentioning them will only ruin our mood and our good luck. Since Fu Wang had already made his decision, Qi Kuang stopped talking about Xianxia and the others, in case he made Fu Wang unhappy. While they were chatting, thousands of warships of various sizes had already sailed down the river and were very close to the water stockade where Yang Tao had set up camp. In order to increase the success rate, these warships were painted black. Under the cover of the fog, they quietly approached the enemy. Of course, this was impossible. There were regular patrols outside Yang Tao's water stockade. When the warships approached, they would send out a warning. Even so, Fu Wang and the others had bought a lot of precious time. Yang Tao was still awake. He was waiting for news from Yan Lin while he was correcting military affairs. His brows were tightly knitted. At this moment, his sharp ears heard the faint sound of a rocket warning. Did I hear wrongly? Yang Tao murmured in a low voice. There was a flurry of footsteps outside the tent. What is it? The soldier said, My lord, a large number of enemies are attacking us from outside the stockade. Enemy attack? The word jumped out. Yang Tao's nerves tightened. He recalled the words Yan Lin had left him before he left. There really was an enemy attack. Gather the troops and fend off the enemy. He didn't change out of his military uniform. He strode out of the tent and took down the weapon hanging on the rack. Outside the stockade, the warships were lit up. The enemy's warships were lined up in a row, as if they were going to surround the entire shore. The soldiers on his side were already busy. The sky was filled with fire arrows, dispersing the fog. The shouts were so loud that it hurt their eardrums. Fu Wang was well prepared for this sneak attack. He didn't give the enemy any time to react. As soon as he arrived, he launched a fierce combination of punches. Because of the southeast wind, Fu Wang and the others couldn't fight the enemy for too long. Otherwise, the fire would reach them. Fu Wang stood on the deck and killed dozens of enemies who tried to come over. He kicked the bodies into the water and they floated to the surface after a while. Kill them and destroy their warships. The wind is not good for us. We can't fight for long. We should get ashore. Relying on their high fighting spirit, the soldiers rushed to the enemy's deck as if they had been injected with chicken blood. They ignored the spitting flames and directly engaged the enemy in close combat. Following the shouts, bodies of both sides fell into the water. The air was filled with the smell of blood and burning. Qi Kuang commanded the navy to restrict and destroy the enemy's warships. Fu Wang ordered the archers to clean up the enemy. They worked together to break through the enemy's weakest defense line and take the opportunity to get ashore. The heavy hammers hit the enemy's warships. The warships were already surrounded by fire. One hit and half of them collapsed. Because they had the upper hand, the enemy couldn't gather in time. By the time the main army arrived, Fu Wang had already gotten ashore. Although there were no large-scale weapons like ballistae or catapults, there were many archers and shield soldiers who managed to stabilize the situation. The soldiers on the warships were much more relaxed. They relied on the height of the ship to avoid most of the attacks and used the terrain to attack the enemy effectively. The soldiers under Yang Tao's command were indeed not a motley crowd. Their morale hadn't dropped much and their fighting spirit was still high. Fighting on three sides, Yang Tao was at a disadvantage. However, the Qiu family didn't know about this. They were still dreaming and didn't know that disaster had already arrived. In their dreams, the mansion was already surrounded by hundreds of soldiers. The centurion in the lead lifted his leg and kicked the door open. Chapter 1563. It was already past midnight. The entire Qiu residence had fallen into silence. Only the patrolling servants were still yawning on their night shift. At this moment, a loud bang rang out. The door was violently smashed open, startling the night watchman. Who are you? Who allowed you to trespass into my private residence? Guards, there are villains here. The watchman was a middle-aged man with a protruding mouth and monkey cheeks. His eyes were dark, sunken, and swollen. He did not look energetic at all. When the centurion sent his men to rush into the Qiu residence, he tried to stop them but was unexpectedly kicked away by the centurion. The centurion said, "Remember, no one in the Qiu residence is allowed to escape. If one escapes, you will bear the consequences." This was a death order from above. They had to take it seriously. No matter how the watchman called for help, they rushed into the residence. The watchman's call for help was effective. The patrolling servants heard the commotion and ran over to check on the situation, but they were captured and detained. The soldiers' violent enforcement of the law made a lot of noise. Several people who were sound asleep were startled awake. Although old Master Qiu was old, he did not change his fondness for beauties. He always wanted a wife to warm his bed. She looked to be about 17 or 18 years old. When she heard the noise outside, she immediately shook the disheveled old man beside her to wake him up, but he scolded her instead. "What do you want to do in the middle of the night, not letting anyone sleep?" Old Master Qiu was very angry in bed. If he was in a bad mood, he would whip someone to death. Thus no one dared to disturb him. This new lady didn't know the rules. She was scared, but at the same time she showed a timid and fearful expression. He was very nervous. Reporting to Old Master, there seems to be an intruder outside. Old Master Chiu rose angrily and hurriedly grabbed his outer robe to drape it over his shoulders. When he got up, he kicked the woman in the chest. Although this Old Master Chiu was very old, the strength of his kick was not weak. The woman almost fainted. Useless. As soon as he opened the door, several soldiers dressed in neat leather armor blocked the door and looked like they were going to arrest him. Old Master Chiu had never seen such a scene. He was so scared that his limbs turned cold. At the same time, an unknown anger rose in him. Who are you? This place is under the rule of the Lanting Duke. You bandits are committing crimes here. Are you tired of living? Hearing this, the soldiers looked at each other and could not help but mock. What the hell? Capture him. Don't let this old man escape. Not only was Old Master Chiu in the room, but there was also a beautiful lady as pretty as a flower. When everyone caught sight of the disheveled old man's attire and the young lady's appearance, they could not help but scoff. He was already so old, yet he was still lustful and defiled a woman who was old enough to be his granddaughter. He was really shameless. Old Master Chiu's hands were twisted behind his back. He was in so much pain that the veins on his forehead were bulging. He shouted loudly, but it was nothing more than a warning and a threat. He was using Jiang Pingji's name to intimidate others. The soldiers' ears hurt from listening to them. A clever soldier looked around and saw a pair of blue underwear lying beside Old Master Chiu's bed. He grabbed it, crumpled it into a ball and stuffed it into Old Master Chiu's mouth. You finally shut up. You've almost made me deaf. Seeing the situation, the lady who was captured could not care less about crying. Instead, she revealed an indescribable expression. When Old Master Chiu was young, he did not control himself and contracted a minor illness that was difficult to talk about. As a result, he could not control his urine and feces in his sleep when he was old. That pair of cyan underwear was taken off after being soaked in urine. She was bought to accompany Old Master Chiu. Not only was she to warm his bed and let him take advantage of her, but her other task was to help him change his dirty underwear to prevent him from flying into a rage when he woke up the next day. At that moment, someone actually stuffed it into his mouth. This was really... Apart from Old Master Chiu being captured, Old Master Chiu's son Chiu Meng was no better. Old Master Chiu loved beauties and Chiu Meng was no exception. He could not be away from women for even a day. Chiu Meng felt that he had made a great contribution to Yang Tao. In the future he would have an easy time becoming an official. In his excitement he was in high spirits and fooled around with his concubine for half the night. When the soldiers barged in, he had just fallen asleep out of exhaustion. He was a light sleeper and was woken up in no time. What's the ruckus outside? He nudged his concubine and asked her to get up and go outside to take a look. He went back to sleep. His concubine did as she was told. Unsurprisingly, she was startled by the soldiers who had barged in and let out a high-pitched scream. Chiu Meng was woken up by her. He grabbed something and threw it on the ground. It's the middle of the night. Do you want to die? Soon, Chiu Meng heard loud and heavy footsteps approaching him. Who are you? Chiu Meng was not Old Master Chiu, who did not step out of his house and only cared about his health. He immediately recognized the identity of the soldiers. We are arresting you. Do not resist. Otherwise we will kill you on the spot. Please cooperate and do not make things difficult for us. His words were polite, but his actions were not polite at all. Chiu Meng was still in a daze when he was tied up and dragged out. Why are you arresting me? The soldier said, we are also following orders. Orders? Chiu Meng's face turned pale. He quickly thought of the key point and his legs turned into noodles. Could it be? Chiu Meng swallowed nervously. Could it be that his secret actions with Yang Tao had been discovered? If that was the case, wouldn't his life be in danger? Chiu Meng thought of the exterminated Zhao clan and his legs turned even weaker. If not for the soldiers dragging him, he would have fallen. These soldiers were indeed honest. They said that not a single person could escape. They even tied the wings of the two old hens raised in the kitchen and dragged them out. The centurion couldn't help but facepalm. Were the soldiers under him really not retarded? Put these people in prison and wait for the general and the counselor to come back for interrogation. Chiu Meng didn't believe it. He shouted, you have no evidence. Why are you accusing people? The centurion's left hand pressed on the hilt of his saber. His eyes were sharp and murderous, making Qiu Meng's heart tremble. Unexpectedly, the centurion was a cultured man. He said in a genteel manner, "If you don't want people to know, then don't do it. You should reflect on yourself." Qiu Meng paled in fright. Old Master Qiu had also guessed it. He was so frightened that he wet his pants. The soldier sneered, "What a pair of promising father and son." Everyone in the Qiu residence was locked in the prison. The originally empty cell was immediately filled with people, and there was even noisy background music. Qiu Meng and Old Master Qiu were locked together. Could it be that there was a leak somewhere? Qiu Meng tried to calm his wildly beating heart. He didn't know whether to comfort the old master or himself. "Father, don't panic. Once Yang Tao wins, they can't do anything to us." Old Master Qiu looked haggard and miserable, but he could only trust his youngest son. Chapter 1564. "Bah, you're still lucky when you're at death's door." The jailer who was guarding Qiu Meng and his brother heard the conversation and cursed in a low voice with a look of disdain on his face. Everyone in Jiang Pingji's camp knew that their lord rarely threw people into prison, let alone arrested an entire family. Once she did that, it meant that the people she arrested had committed an unforgivable crime and were destined to walk out of prison alive. The older jailer glared at him. "Shut up. These people are still suspects before the general and the military counselor interrogate them." The third jailer didn't know the details and asked curiously, "What did they do to get locked up?" "Who knows what they did? The last one who was sent here was a traitor from the Zhao family. These people are the same as the Zhao family." The first jailer smiled maliciously and said in a low voice, "Maybe they're the same." Jailers often dealt with all kinds of crimes. Squatting in the dark, damp and cold dungeon to guard the prisoners all day long, even a mentally healthy person would become mentally unhealthy after a long time. In order to relieve the pressure, many jailers developed a gossipy personality. "If that's the case, won't all of them?" He made a gesture of cutting his throat with his hand. The meaning was obvious. "If they really are traitors, we won't kill them to frighten them. Are we going to treat them well and keep them alive until the new year?" The prisoners' cries and pleas for mercy successfully drowned out the conversation of the jailers. The Qiu family didn't hear it. They were comforting themselves that Yang Tao would win. As long as Yang Tao defeated Fu Wang's army, they would be the heroes of the war. What they didn't know was that Yang Tao's army was also on the verge of collapse. First was Yan Lin's side. Although Yangxi was Feng Zhen's bait, it wasn't that easy to bite. All the warships were painted black, which made them invisible in the dark. It was as if they were in stealth mode and could sneak up on the enemy. Yan Lin and the others lost the initiative. By the time they realized what was going on, Yangxi had already finished his set of moves. The vanguard warships were robbed, hit and burned. As soon as the battle started, they were overwhelmed by Yangxi's army. Even though Yan Lin managed to stabilize the situation as fast as he could, the fog around them was their biggest obstacle. It was hard to tell the enemy from their own side. Even though they had the same bugle or battle drum, their ships were still crowded together. They kept bumping into each other and they kept bumping into each other. Yangxi's side was at an advantage. Because they were connected by hemp ropes, the distance between the warships could be roughly determined by the tightness of the hemp ropes. Even though their mobility was not as agile as individual combat, they would not make mistakes like fighting against each other. Under the fire, several enemy warships were burned. The flames shot into the sky like a dazzling flower on the river. The firelight penetrated the thick fog and dyed it orange, as if it were a lighthouse illuminating the ships in the fog. Yangxi said with a smile, "This battle was really satisfying. All the anger that I've been suppressing in the past few days has dissipated." Yangxi wasn't the only one who thought this way. Feng Zhen, who had been the scapegoat for the defeat in the last battle, had a clearer understanding of the situation. Feng Zhen was the one who lost the last battle. He had a better understanding. Did they really think that Yang Tao and the others guessed that Jingyang had a granary because the enemy was too smart? No, this was all part of Feng Zhen's plan. The granary in Jingyang was also a bait that he had purposely used to attract the enemy. When the enemy took the bait, how could they let them go? Of course, they had to kill all of them at once. The enemy generals understood this too. There was no way they could break out of the encirclement because of the disparity in strength. They could only prepare themselves for a life and death struggle. Even if they had to die here, they would drag a few more souls down with them. The raging fire engulfed the entire Jingyang granary. The night sky, which had been dyed orange-red by the smoke, looked like colorful ink blooming in a painting. Stubborn resistance. Fengzhen looked coldly at the movements in the Jingyang granary. The enemy was obviously planning to perish together with them. He wasn't a kind person. Since the enemy wanted to die, he would grant them their wish. They wouldn't be able to leave. I wonder how General Fu is doing. Seeing that the enemy couldn't do anything, Fengzhen finally had time to worry about the situation on the main battlefield. If Fu Wang won, Yang Tao wouldn't be able to defend Zhangzhou. He would have to retreat from Dongqing with his remaining soldiers. Then the whole of Dongqing would be in his lord's hands. If Fu Wang lost, Yang Tao would also be greatly weakened. If he could capture Yang Tao in one go, that would be even better. Fengzhen was dreaming, but reality didn't always go according to one's wishes. Fu Wang led his soldiers to land. Behind him, the archers on the warships helped to clear the enemy. They quickly gained a foothold. Without hesitation, Fu Wang ordered an attack. The soldiers on one side were aggressive and full of fighting spirit. The morale of the other side was declining. They gradually distanced themselves from each other. With the help of the southeast wind, the fire spread quickly. Smoke rose. Under the violent destruction of Qi Kuang's navy, Yang Tao's water stockade quickly crumbled like dried twigs. The fire spread, burning the air and turning the sky red like it was daytime. Yang Tao killed a few people in a row. His expression was so serious that water could drip from it. He was extremely regretful. He also knew that regardless of whether the information sent by the Qiu family was true or not, everything was within the enemy's calculations. They had fallen into a trap. In order to intercept the food, Yang Tao let Yan Lin and the old general take away many soldiers. The remaining people couldn't resist the ferocious enemies. Qian Su found his lord in the chaos and said hurriedly, "Lord, please retreat immediately." Yang Tao gritted his teeth, his cheeks trembling faintly. "How can we retreat at this time?" As soon as he finished speaking, a few more enemies came out of nowhere. Yang Tao swiftly cut off their heads. Yang Tao said stubbornly, "You don't have to persuade me. I know what to do." As the Lord, Yang Tao had a team of elite guards by his side to protect him. However, he saw that the situation at the front was critical and sent them away. Qian Su said, "My lord's safety is the most important. Even if you don't think about yourself, you have to think about Mistress and the young master." Yang Tao said, "I've already sent people to find Mistress and send her to Nanxing. We can plan later, but we can't lose this place for now." He wasn't a blockhead, but he really couldn't leave so many soldiers to die and become a coward. Even if he had to retreat, he had to lead the surviving soldiers to block the enemy's attack and retreat while fighting. I'm not afraid of death. Chapter 1565. Be careful, counselor. The enemy's attack was too fierce. As time went by, the fog on the river became thicker and thicker. This was one disaster after another for Yanlin. An arrow came out of nowhere. As soon as the guard opened his mouth, Yanlin swung his sword and shot the arrow down without looking back. "Counselor, the enemy is too strong. We can't pinpoint their exact location. I'm afraid we can't stop them," Yanlin said. "If we can't stop them, give the order to retreat. Order the badly damaged warships to hold them off." But if we retreat and we lose, how will we explain to our lord?" "I'll take responsibility. You don't have to worry about it." Yanlin said coldly to the general, "The enemy came prepared. If we can't beat them, why don't we retreat? Are we going to regret it after we lose the lives of our soldiers? Give the order to retreat and return to the camp immediately." Even though Yanlin had told Yang Tao to be careful of the enemy's sneak attack, the sneak attack that Yanlin mentioned and the actual attack were not on the same level. According to Yanlin's prediction, there weren't many enemies attacking the camp, and most of them were injured soldiers. They weren't a threat at all. But now they had fallen into the enemy's trap. The enemy had sent many elite soldiers to attack the water stockade. They had enough supplies and supplies. Their lord might not be able to hold the fort. Yanlin knew Yang Tao too well. Yang Tao was like Yang Jian. He seemed warm and generous, but he was actually stubborn. If they didn't send reinforcements, Yanlin was worried that Yang Tao would lead his men to fight to the death. It would be a great loss if they lost their lives for nothing. "What? Our lord also has enemies," Yanlin said coldly. "What else?" "Fengzhen used the Qiu family to mislead us. Didn't he plan for so long just for this opportunity?" Feng Zhen and the others knew that the Qiu family was up to no good, but they still held back their anger and waited until today to make their move. However, Feng Zhen and the others' efforts paid off. Nearly half of Yanlin's warships were destroyed. Many of the sailors were injured or killed. The corpses on the river could form a small island. Go back now. Don't delay. Yanlin said and closed his eyes. He seemed calm, but there was panic and worry hidden underneath. He was afraid that he wouldn't make it back in time. He decisively abandoned the broken battleship and used it to block the enemy's battleship, which bought him time to retreat. Because of the thick fog, visibility was very low. Xianxia also discovered that the enemy's firepower was not right as they were fighting. Only then did he realize that they had escaped. Xianxia snorted and clicked his tongue. Who's the one commanding the troops? How could he just leave without saying a word? Lao General smiled bitterly and pressed his hand against the wound on his arm. During the chaotic battle, he was careless and was shot in the arm by an enemy arrow. Although he lost a lot of blood, his life was not in danger. If they're going to retreat and run for their lives, why would they send someone to inform the military counselor? Why didn't you tell me? Xianxia said plausibly. Do you know who escaped? Si Jiang was stunned for a moment before he asked, who? Xianxia said with an expression that said, it's all military exploits. The military merits that belong to me escaped and I'm not allowed to ask about it? The deputy general. He didn't know whether he should feel sorry for the enemy who had been turned into military merits, or be impressed by the shamelessness and invincible logic of his military counselor. He asked shakily, what should we do now, military counselor? Xianxia said, what should we do? Go after them. Can you bear it when a cooked duck flies in front of your eyes? Lao General shook his head. No. They went after them immediately. Unfortunately, there was a gap called dimension between ideals and reality. Ideals were great, but reality was too cruel. Counselor, the wreckage of the enemy's battleships and ours are all over the river. It's a serious hindrance to our army. Xianxia said, clear those wreckages. Quickly. The deputy general said again, then should we cut the ropes connecting the two ships as well? If they didn't cut them, even if the wreckages were cleared, the battleships that were connected in a V shape wouldn't be able to pass together. Xianxia said, it's untied. Let's catch up with them first. Although Xianxia and the others moved very fast, they still couldn't catch up with the tail of Yanlin's army. They were not as familiar with the water as Yanlin's navy was. The fog was still thick, which would affect the ship's ability to tell the direction. Moreover, Yanlin and the others were retreating along the river. They had to open the sails so they couldn't go too fast. It would be strange if Xianxia and the others could catch up. Seeing the cooked duck fly away and the military merits that were in his grasp disappear, Xianxia slapped his thigh and sighed with regret. He had hoped to ask the Lord for more rewards this time. He didn't expect that he would fail at the last moment. Could it be that he really had to live off a woman and wait for Jiang Shaowei to support the family and feed the children? Xianxia's regret was not over yet. When he heard that the commander of the enemy was Yanlin, his eyes almost popped out. Did he really manage to catch the big fish, Yanlin, with his meager effort? What a pity. The big fish was here but he couldn't catch him. What a loss. Xianxia's resentment was almost materialized, but Yanlin was determined to return. The closer he got, the clearer the flames became. He didn't lead his men to fight Fu Wang's army head-on. Instead, he chose to go ashore from another shore. It was obvious that Yang Tao's men were about to die. The riverbank was filled with corpses. Most of them were Yang Tao's men and the rest were the enemies. Yanlin put the torch near the river and saw that the water had been dyed red with blood. His heart sank. Take some men to look for the Lord. If you see the enemy, warn them. Remember to stay alive. Don't force yourself. Yanlin and the others were in luck. They ran into many defeated soldiers along the way. After a few questions, he found out Yang Tao's whereabouts from them. Yanlin made a prompt decision. He took more than half of his men to support Yang Tao, and the rest of them drove the warship to the designated location. After today, Xianxia would be lost. Yanlin had to plan a way out for Yang Tao so that he wouldn't fall into the enemy's hands. If he could escort Yang Tao to the warship and leave for Nanxing, there would be a chance for him to rise again in the future. Yanlin's plan was good, but it depended on whether his enemy would give him the chance. This enemy was not only Jiang Pingji, but also in Cui, who occupied most of Nanxing's land. Yanlin and his men fought off a few scattered waves of enemies. After some effort, they finally found Yang Tao, who was retreating to the south. "Greetings, my lord." By the time they found Yang Tao, Yanlin's sword was full of blood. His armor was no longer shiny and clean. He was covered in blood. "Xiaoyang." Seeing Yanlin, Yang Tao relaxed a little. He helped him up and said, "I'm glad you're okay. Let's not talk about anything else." Yanlin said, "I didn't see through the enemy's evil plan, which put the lord in danger and the soldiers in danger." Yang Tao interrupted him. "You have nothing to do with this. I can only blame myself for trusting a villain." Yanlin had been training his troops outside. Yang Tao was the one who made the decisions for the Qiu family. He couldn't be blamed. Chapter 1566. Xiaoyang about this. Yang Tao tried to say something, but Yanlin didn't give him a chance. He tried to force Yang Tao to agree with him. Yang Tao looked at his childhood friend who was kneeling on the ground and begging him. Everything he wanted to say was stuck in his throat. "But I agree." Qianxia could only sigh. Only Yanlin could control his master. Of course, only his lord Yang Tao could tolerate Yanlin's occasional overbearing attitude. If Yanlin had been a petty lord, he would have been offended by Yanlin's forceful actions. After a while, Yang Tao said, "I've sent people to escort my wife and sister away. Don't worry, Xiaoyang." One was his sister and the other was his wife's first wife. They were the two most important women in Yanlin's life. Nothing could happen to them. Yanlin said, "Your Highness is thoughtful. I thank you on behalf of my wife." Yang Tao didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Yanlin didn't need to thank him. Even if he didn't say anything, Yang Tao would still protect them. Yanlin continued, "We can't stay here for long. We don't know when the enemy will catch up. Please leave first, my lord." Yang Tao left the water stockade with the rest of his troops. He knew the terrain well enough to shake off the enemy, but it wasn't a long-term plan. The fog on the river was still there. Yanlin planned to let Yang Tao board the boat and escape under the cover of the fog. If they waited until dawn, the enemy would catch up with them. It was too dangerous. Yang Tao nodded. He took 2 steps forward and was about to get on the horse. Suddenly he remembered something else. "Xiaoyang, you're not leaving?" Yanlin said naturally, "The enemy is coming fiercely. I'll delay them for a while and leave when my lord is safe." "That won't do." Yang Tao refused immediately. "What if something happens to you? How can I explain it to my wife?" Yang Tao's wife was Yanlin's sister. How could Yanlin stay and delay the enemy for him? Did Xiaoyang know what would happen to him if he stayed? Yanlin said calmly, "My lord, I won't have to worry about anything if you leave first. If you stay instead." He didn't mention that Yang Tao would make enemies by staying. Not only would he not be able to help, but he would also arouse the enemy's fighting spirit. What fighting spirit? Killing the leader of the enemy's feudal vassals would not only leave a good name in the annals of history, but the rewards would also benefit him for a lifetime. Yang Tao was speechless. His eyes turned red. Obviously, he didn't agree to Yanlin's suggestion. "Don't worry, Your Highness. I will protect myself and catch up with Your Highness as soon as possible." After that, Yanlin turned to Qianxia and said, "I'll have to trouble you to keep an eye on Master Gu later. If there are any enemies chasing after you, remember one thing. Don't get caught up in a fight. Run if you can." As long as he escaped into Yang Tao's territory in Nanxing, he would basically be safe. He could not be greedy for a moment of merit and forget about the important matters. Qianxia nodded to show that she remembered and immediately mounted the horse. Yang Tao did not have a choice even if he did not want to leave. Yanlin left most of the wounded soldiers behind, while Yang Tao took the rest of the elite soldiers with him. "It's my fault for underestimating you. To think that I would suffer such a crushing defeat." Yanlin sighed with emotion. He sent some of his soldiers as bait to confuse the enemy and mislead them. Fu Wang and the others did not know much about the terrain of Zhangzhou. They did not know that Yang Tao and the others would escape through the river mouth. What Yanlin needed to do was to buy as much time as possible. It would be best if he could escape unscathed. If not, he had to at least ensure the safety of his master. Thinking of this, Yanlin's head hurt even more. Perhaps it was because he was used to being a nanny for more than 20 years. He subconsciously worried about Yang Tao. He was worried that no one would be able to persuade Yang Tao after he passed away. Maybe this is the best for him. When Yang Jian was alive, Yang Tao was well protected. After Yang Jian died, Yanlin had to take on the responsibility of a father. Yanlin had to be a father and a mother at the same time. Although he had protected Yang Tao's temperament, his temperament was not suitable for chaotic times. Strangely, his current mood was somewhat similar to Nie Liang's before he died. Both of them were worried about their naughty child. Nie Qing was too kind while Yang Tao was too sincere and passionate. Yanlin took out a handkerchief and wiped the blood off his sword. Then he put the plain handkerchief back into his sleeve. Report. We found traces of the enemy. Yanlin asked, how many of them? The soldier answered, about 1,000 of them. 1,000 of them? That was more than enough. They were probably sent by Fu Wang to look for the remaining soldiers. Listen to my command. Get into formation. Even if we have to die, we can't let the enemy win so easily. Yanlin swore that he had killed more people in his previous life than he had tonight. A rough calculation showed that he had killed more than 100 people. This was a good result for a counselor who worked as a civil servant for many years. Even if he went to hell, he would have 100 people to die with him. It was not a big loss. Because of Yanlin's interference, not only did Fu Wang fail to find Yang Tao, but he was also misled into going in the opposite direction. When the soldier learned from the remaining soldiers that Yang Tao and the others had gone in the opposite direction, his face was as colorful as a palette that had been knocked over. At this time the sky was turning gray. The fog on the river had mostly dissipated. Yang Si and the others were the first to arrive. They wanted to congratulate Fu Wang, but they did not expect him to look angry. General Fu, what's going on? Fu Wang was hot-tempered when he was angry. He loosened his collar and said, we were tricked. Yang Tao escaped. The cooked duck had flown away, and the military merits that had been handed to them were gone. Hearing this, Yang Si did not stay silent. Instead he smiled and spread out his hands. What a coincidence. I let Yanlin escape too. Were they born in the year of the rabbit? Fu Wang said angrily, come on. Have you ever seen a rabbit that can run on the river? How could he still be in the mood to talk at a time like this? Yang Si was born with a sarcastic face. No matter how nice the words came out of his mouth, they always sounded sarcastic. If Fu Wang did not know this man's temperament, he might have been angry. Seeing that Fu Wang was really angry, Yang Si did not have the guts to test the waters. Instead, he summoned Fu Wang's deputy general and asked him what was going on. This deputy general was brought by Fu Wang when he surrendered. He was honest and loyal, so Yang Si was not worried that he would lie. The deputy general told him all the details and Yang Si listened attentively. After a while, Yang Si punched his palm and laughed. You're lucky. Someone slipped through the net. Someone slipped through the net? Who slipped through the net? Fu Wang asked. Yang Si said, Yan Xiaoyang, I suspect that the person who led the soldiers to trick you and mislead you here is Yanlin. Fu Wang frowned in confusion. Why are you so sure? Maybe there is someone else. Chapter 1567. Really? Fu Wang had already prepared himself to return empty-handed, but he had not expected Yanlin to slip through the net. Although Yang Si was usually not very reliable, he was still very serious when it came to business. He would not lie to him about this. Why would I lie to you? I heard that Yang Tao and Yanlin have always been inseparable. If we capture Yanlin, we might be able to use him to threaten Yang Tao. Even though the methods used to threaten others were rather despicable, there was no such thing as morality when it came to war. As long as they could win, it would be fine. Who would want to pretend to be a gentleman? In addition, Yang Tao lost more than 100,000 soldiers in this battle. Aside from a few who were temporarily recruited, most of them were brought from Nanxing. If Yanlin is captured, there will be no one to help Yang Tao. Sooner or later he will be in big trouble. Fu Wang could understand the first part of the sentence, but he was confused by the latter part. Why did Yang Si sound like Yang Tao was not a good person? Fu Wang asked directly, from what you said, you don't have a high opinion of Yang Tao. His lord had a high opinion of Yang Tao. How could Yang Jingrong have such high standards? When did I say that? Yang Si shook his head and said, Yang Tao became one of the feudal lords in troubled times. That alone is better than countless people. I said that because Yang Tao is not a man of wealth and power. He is straightforward and straightforward. He is the kind of person who can't be bothered with anything. Why didn't General Fu think about it? Yang Tao is from Dongqing. The aristocrats of Nanxing were willing to support him because Yang Tao was profitable. Now that Yang Tao had lost the war, his foundation was in danger. Without Yanlin's help, it was only a matter of time before Yang Tao fell out with his previous aristocratic family, given his straightforward character. Maybe we don't have to do anything. Yang Tao will. Yang Si winked at Fu Wang and raised his hand to cut off his head. Fu Wang was not optimistic about this speculation. No matter how straightforward Yang Tao was, he was not stupid. There was no way he would put himself in that situation. The most important thing now is to capture Yanlin. Yang Tao is gone. Yan Xiaoyang can't escape again. Although Fu Wang was not as enthusiastic about building a career as Yang Si, he was also a man who had to support his family. Generals were not like scholars. Scholars could make a living in times of peace and chaos. Martial artists could only make money during times of war. In times of peace there were not many opportunities. Yang Si said, "I think so too." Even though he knew that Yang Tao would not be able to catch up, Fu Wang still sent people to chase after him. It would be best if he could catch up with them, but if he couldn't, he would also be able to give an explanation to his lord so that he wouldn't be criticized for slacking off. Fu Wang and his companion focused on capturing Yanlin. Compared to capturing Yang Tao, capturing Yanlin was more realistic. Even though Yanlin had some wounded soldiers, they were all wounded and didn't have much food with them. They wouldn't last long. All Fu Wang had to do was to send people to block the shore, keep an eye on the direction of the boats and block off Yanlin's escape route. Sooner or later he would be caught. This way there's no way Yan Xiaoyang can escape. Fu Wang was full of confidence. Beside him Yang Si looked on with a smile and did not comment. He was afraid that he would be beaten if he said anything. Yang Si had a feeling that Fu Wang would be slapped in the face. It turned out that a counselor's intuition was stronger and more accurate than a woman's sixth sense. Fu Wang had cast a wide net, but he still couldn't catch Yanlin. Bastard, if we catch him we'll break his legs. Let's see how he's going to escape. Fu Wang was extremely busy. Not only did he have to deal with the aftermath of the war, but he also had to appease the local people. He also had to politely reject the local forces that came to him to express their goodwill. He didn't want them to waste his time. After so many twists and turns, a day had passed. The soldiers he sent out had not stopped Yanlin's army. Instead, Yanlin had escaped deep into the mountains. Fu Wang was so angry that he wanted to set fire to the mountains to smoke them out. Didn't my lord say that if you set fire to the mountains, you'll spend the rest of your life in prison? Yang Si had a frivolous smile on his face which made Fu Wang's hands itch. He wished he could make intimate contact with Yang Si's face with his palm. Fu Wang said, "When did my lord say such nonsense?" Yang Si said, "Many years ago when we were drinking in the brothel. If you don't believe me, I can write to her and ask her." Fu Wang was speechless. He thought that Feng Longzi was the only one who would bring his lord to a brothel. He didn't expect that Yang Si was also a Cancer. Seeing that Fu Wang was about to get angry, Yang Si quickly changed the topic. He comforted him, "The weather is dry now. If he really set fire to the mountains, it won't just affect this area. I heard that there are many villages and terraced fields in the mountains. If General Fu sets fire to the mountains, many innocent people will be affected. If my lord finds out, General Fu will be scolded." Fu Wang rolled his eyes. He only said that because he was angry. Why would he really set fire to the mountains? Then what should we do now? Fu Wang asked, "Are we just going to watch them jump up and down?" Yang Si said, "Send people to continue chasing after them. Block all the exits so that Yanlin can't save himself. We can also exhaust them to death." Fu Wang sighed and chose to listen to Yang Si's Buddhist advice. Just as Yang Si said, the biggest problem for Yanlin and the others was food. They only had enough food for one day. After that, they would have to kill horses to fill their stomachs. They also had to climb mountains and cross rivers, which was more exhausting than usual. At this rate, they wouldn't last more than a few days. However, that was not the worst news. The enemy had obviously seen through Yanlin's plan. They had arranged a large number of soldiers everywhere. Yanlin couldn't break out of the encirclement with his current manpower. If they took the land route, all the passes would be heavily guarded. If they took the water route, all the ports would be guarded too. There was no way to borrow a boat. It seemed like a dead end, but Yanlin didn't give up, let alone admit defeat. "I know the situation. It's good that my lord is safe and sound." As soon as Yanlin finished speaking, he felt a sharp pain from the wound on his left shoulder. He frowned in discomfort. The wound was caused by a stray arrow when he was being chased by the enemy. It wasn't a serious injury normally, but there were no medics, no medicine, not even water to clean the wound. He could only bandage it hastily to stop the bleeding. The weather was hot and Yanlin's armor was heavy. The edge of the wound began to itch and turn red. It looked like it was going to fester. However, Yanlin couldn't care less. He forced himself to lead hundreds of soldiers deep into the mountains to find their destination. If there were no boats, they would make their own. The bamboo here was perfect for making bamboo raft. With bamboo rafts, they didn't need to go to the shore. They could leave by water in the dark. Even though it was a risky move, it was better than waiting for death. There was strength in numbers. They managed to survive for 3 to 4 days by killing horses, digging weeds and hunting beasts in the mountains. They had to be careful in case the enemy found them. When the bamboo rafts were ready, Yanlin asked the rest of the soldiers if they wanted to stay. Those who didn't want to leave were dismissed. Even though Yanlin had a high reputation in the army, the soldiers were just ordinary people. They had lost their morale after days of wandering. There was no internal strife because the soldiers were still alive. Chapter 1568. In the end, less than half of them were willing to stay. They were worried that Yanlin was testing their loyalty. If they said they wanted to leave, they would be killed to keep their mouths shut. If they didn't have this worry, it would be great if only a third of them could stay. Yanlin didn't say anything. He took off his valuables and handed them to a centurion. He asked him to exchange them for silver as food for the soldiers. The centurion trembled as he took the jade pendant, jade flute, and some gold from Yanlin. Tears rolled down his cheeks. They bowed to Yanlin and said their blessings, choking with sobs. Yanlin heaved a long sigh. He ordered his men to push the bamboo raft into the water. It was getting dark. It was the best time to escape. However, the escape was not so smooth. The first problem they encountered was Yanlin's illness. His festering wounds gave off a foul smell and his body was burning. In order to escape, Yanlin hadn't rested for the past few days. He didn't care about his health. The day before yesterday he had a low fever. After such a long time his wounds were getting worse. The soldiers couldn't do anything but worry. The wounds were too big and they didn't have the right medicine. It was hot and humid in the mountains. He hadn't rested for days. All these conditions were terrible. It was no surprise that he was sick. The temperature on the river was low at night. The change in temperature worsened Yanlin's condition. The soldier on the same raft raised his hand to touch Yanlin's forehead. The moment he touched it, he was shocked by the temperature. "It's okay." Yanlin looked a little distracted, but he forced himself to say, "Follow the plan. Don't waste time." He dismissed the soldiers who didn't want to leave with him. They would be caught by Fu Wang's troops after they left the mountain. They would be able to find out where Yanlin and the others were after little interrogation. How could the raft be faster than a warship? If they didn't hurry, they wouldn't be able to escape. In fact, Yanlin could have prevented this from happening. He could have killed all the soldiers who tried to leave just as the soldiers feared. He didn't do that not because he was too soft-hearted, but because it was unnecessary. The remaining soldiers had little morale left. If he killed more soldiers, the hundreds of them would be in chaos. "Counselor, your forehead is very hot. If it keeps burning, won't it?" Yu Jiang silently swallowed the words he wanted to say. If they didn't do anything about it, Yanlin would either become an idiot or die. Of course, it could also turn into pneumonia, but there was no such saying in this era. The deputy general didn't respond to him, because Yanlin couldn't stand the protests of his body and passed out. Even in his coma, he could feel himself being in a furnace for a while, thrown into an ice house for a while, shivering all over. Then he felt as if his body was thrown into the deep sea and kept sinking. His surroundings were getting darker and darker. His consciousness was getting more and more blurry. The deputy general's call was more like a faint whisper from the distant sky. No matter how hard he tried to concentrate, he still couldn't hear it clearly. On the other hand, seeing that Yanlin was getting worse, Jiang had to make a decision. He had the rest of the soldiers push the bamboo raft to the planned location. If they were lucky, they might be saved. A soldier said hesitantly, "If we encounter an enemy," Jiang gritted his teeth and said, "then surrender. I don't think the Lord and the military counselor will blame you." They had tried their best, but fate refused to grant them their wish. If the wounded soldiers surrendered, they might be able to live. If they resisted, they would lose hundreds of lives for nothing. The soldier asked again, "What about the general?" the deputy general said. The military counselor's injuries are serious. He has a fever all over his body. We need to go ashore and find a doctor as soon as possible. The soldier felt that something was wrong. They finally had a chance to escape. If they stayed to find a doctor, they might expose their identities. The deputy general understood this, but he also knew that if Yanlin died, they would have to face the furious lord when they returned. Besides, it would be a shame if the military counselor died here. If the heavens had eyes, they would definitely be able to turn the situation around. Zhejiang decided to give it his all. Could the result be worse than Yanlin's death and his own death in battle? Strike. There's still hope. Zhejiang took Yanlin on the raft and left the main group. The future was bleak, and the only thing that kept him going was his determination. After rowing for a long time, Zhejiang and Yanlin finally reached the shore. There was a small fishing village in front of them. Zhejiang thought to himself, I hope there's a doctor here, even if it's a mediocre one. Even though he knew that the possibility was not high, he believed that the heavens must have eyes. The fishing village was not big. There were only about 30 families and about 100 fishermen. Because there was no entertainment and oil was expensive, most people worked at sunrise and slept at sunset. It was already past midnight and the fishing village was shrouded in darkness. To prevent their identities from being exposed, Zhejiang took off the raft and their armor and hid them in the reeds. Then he carried Yanlin into the village. Is anyone here? Is there a doctor in the village? Zhejiang knocked on the doors of several families. Either no one answered or he was scolded. The cowardly ones pretended to be dead. Yes, Zhejiang tried one house after another. When he reached the 7th house, which was near the edge of the village, the owner of the house opened the door. It was dark, but he could vaguely recognize the owner of the house. It was a short woman. The woman glanced at them and said grumpily, Come in. Don't knock. The villagers might get angry and beat you to death. Zhejiang stood at the door, not daring to go in. The woman turned around and lit an oil lamp. She asked, Why don't you come in? The deputy general blinked and secretly clenched the dagger hidden in his sleeve. Isn't the person on your back sick? The woman said, I'm a doctor. The deputy general was surprised. How did the woman know he was here for a doctor? The woman said angrily, Are you stupid? Just now you were knocking on every door, howling and crying. It's not like I'm deaf. The deputy general's face turned red. Fortunately, his skin was dark or it would have been embarrassing. Thank you, doctor. Zhejiang hurried in with Yanlin on his back. He put the patient on an old bamboo mat. The young lady did not talk nonsense. She lit up several oil lamps in a row and could barely see the patient's condition. Yanlin had been so busy that he didn't have time to take care of himself. His hair was messy and his face was stained. It was hard to tell what he looked like. However, the woman could see that he was handsome. He must be a handsome man after washing up. This kid looks promising. Too bad he's a soldier. The deputy general said, What's wrong with being a soldier? The woman took off Yanlin's shirt and pointed to the wound. He's a soldier who hangs his head on his belt. What's wrong with that? The deputy general was speechless. Why did she take off the military advisor's shirt without saying anything? Chapter 1569. Seeing that Zhejiang was still standing there in a daze, the young lady said angrily, What are you doing? Go and boil some hot water. Zhejiang had never seen such a disrespectful woman, but he still counted on the doctor to save his life, so he didn't dare to disobey. I'll go boil the water now. Please wait a moment, doctor. Zhejiang fumbled to boil a pot of hot water. Fortunately, there were a lot of dry firewood and withered grass near the stove, which saved him a lot of effort. After searching for a long time, he finally found a relatively clean wooden basin for cutting vegetables. He rinsed it with clean water and filled it with boiling hot water. When he came back, he was almost scared stiff and almost asked, What are you doing? Zhejiang couldn't help but pull out his dagger, but he didn't dare to act rashly because Yanlin's military counselor was still in her hands. What am I doing? I didn't do anything to him. The young lady was very calm and didn't forget to flirt. She said, As you can see, I don't have clean gauze in my house. I saw that his clothes were made of good material, so I cut them off and soaked them in hot water to disinfect them. Zhejiang, the young lady asked, Is the water I asked you to boil done? Seeing that the young lady didn't want to kill him, Zhejiang put away his dagger and replied, It's done. Bring it over when it's done. The conditions here are poor, so we can only use hot water for simple disinfection. Xianxia didn't understand the latter part, but he understood the first part. He obediently brought the wooden basin over and put it within the young lady's reach. He muttered in a low voice, "My master has a family." The young lady had sharp ears. She said, "I didn't strip him naked. What do you mean by looking like I've ruined his innocence?" Xianxia didn't dare to retort. He stared at the young lady's movements without blinking. The hem of his military counselor's clothes had been cut off by the young lady, and the pieces were piled up on the side. She soaked the cut cloth in hot water several times before picking it out with chopsticks and wringing it out slightly. "There's no hydrogen peroxide or salt water in this broken place. How can we wash the wound?" The young lady tucked her hair behind her ears with her free hand and wiped the rotten flesh around the wound with a piece of cloth with the other hand. At the same time she commanded the deputy general, "Is there still hot water in the pot? Go and cool the hot water. Can barely be used to clean the wound. Then go and get the vinegar from the kitchen." Xianxia was dumbfounded. Shouldn't doctors feel the pulse and prescribe medicine? One moment he was boiling water, the next moment he was cooling it, and the next moment he was bringing vinegar. Xianxia couldn't help but say, "Are you planning to wash my master and cook him in a pot, not forgetting to add vinegar to enhance the flavor?" The young lady's hand paused and she almost poked Yanlin's wound. She turned her head and rolled her eyes at the deputy general. "I told you to go, so go. Are you the doctor or am I the doctor?" The boiling water could barely be used to clean the rotting wound, and the vinegar was used to physically cool it down. "If you don't understand, then shut your mouth. No one will treat you as a mute. If you want this person to live, then do as I say." Xianxia blinked. He was actually suppressed by this person's imposing manner, so he obediently said, "Oh." He found a palm leaf fan and tried to fan the hot water in the pot. It took him a lot of effort to cool the remaining water. When Xianxia returned with the cold water, he almost went crazy when he saw that the young lady had stripped his military counselor down to his underwear. "What are you doing?" "Physically cooling it down," the young lady answered without raising her head. "Why are you so surprised? Are you trying to scare me to death in the middle of the night? This person's temperature is too high. There is no medicine here to reduce fever, and his family is so poor that they can't even afford alcohol. It's good enough that they have a small jar of vinegar. Of course, I remember that the alcohol here is not very strong. I don't know if it will be as effective as this jar of vinegar." The deputy general saw that the young lady was wiping Yanlin's chest, back, forehead, armpits, and thighs with a piece of cloth that was stained with vinegar. She looked very serious and it didn't seem like she was taking advantage of him. Xianxia was finally relieved. Seeing that Xianxia had brought the cold water over, the little lady threw the rags to him and warned, "Do you remember what I did just now? Wipe him with the vinegar and I'll take care of his wound." The wound on Yanlin's shoulder was not very deep, but it was very long. It had not been treated for a few days, so the wound was badly infected. "Give me your knife." The young lady reached out her hand to Xianxia. He hesitated for a moment, then gave it to her. She brought over an oil lamp and put the blade over the fire to warm it. "What are you doing?" "Disinfecting. I guess you don't know what disinfecting is. Your knife must have seen blood before. Who knows what's on it?" The young lady said, "I'm going to use it to clean up the remaining rotten flesh. The knife can't have any dirty things on it, so I'm going to use the fire to warm it." The young lady looked very young, but her hand holding the knife was very steady. Xianxia clearly saw her raise and lower the knife to remove the rotten flesh. Soon fresh blood flowed out of Yanlin's wound. Even though Yanlin was unconscious, his body was still trembling. His brows were tightly knitted and his cracked lips were trembling. The young lady did not move. She washed the wound with cold water several times, then threaded a thin thread that had been heated in the hot water into the needle. "What are you doing?" Xianxia was wiping Yanlin's wound for the third time when he saw the young lady was about to put the needle into his wound. "I'm stitching, silly boy." The young lady skillfully stitched the wound as she spoke. She said, "His wound is long, so stitching it has many advantages. For example, it can quickly stop the bleeding, prevent the wound from getting infected, promote the healing of the wound, and reduce the chance of the rupture of the wound. This boy is lucky. I've checked his wound and didn't find anything like rust. Otherwise, the chances of him being contaminated by Clostridium tetani would be greatly increased. The medical standards in this place are terrible. If it's tetanus, you should prepare for his funeral as soon as possible. In just a few sentences, Si Jiang became more and more dizzy while the little lady finished stitching up the wound. Looking at the ugly wound on his shoulder that looked like a centipede, the young lady sighed with regret. I've been a doctor for so many years and I've done hundreds of surgeries. This is the ugliest wound I've ever stitched. I'm going to fix the wound a little so that it won't leave an ugly scar. Sigh, this young man is so handsome and his body is so good-looking. It would ruin his beauty if he got a scar like this. Si Jiang cleaned Yanlin's wound for a while, then touched his forehead with the back of his hand. Sir doesn't seem to have a high fever anymore. Yes, that's good news, the young lady said. I'll go get some herbs and boil them for him to drink. Si Jiang nodded gratefully. Little did he know that the young lady sighed as soon as she left the room. I'm probably the poorest person in the world. He never expected that the person he saved was the host's archenemy, Yanlin. Chapter 1570. Yanlin was so poor that he didn't even have a single valuable item. The Dream of 1,000 Years event had been held for so many years, and so many lucky people had left with some souvenirs. He was the only one who would have to return empty-handed. That's right, it was him. This lucky guy was also a typical guy who wore women's clothes. Less than a quarter of an hour after he arrived, he heard someone knocking on the door of every house, begging and crying. The guy was crying so hard that he felt sorry for him, so he decided to save him. Unfortunately, he didn't have anything he wanted, so he could only do his best. It was up to Yanlin to save his own life. Strawberry smoothie, stop crying. Why did this lucky guy get selected with less than 10 comments? Blueberry smoothie, give up. The luck in the live streaming room has nothing to do with activity. Mysterious, don't save stupid. As a regular streamer, many of the IDs of the big shots looked familiar. Only this time the lucky guy was a stranger. He had only managed to get a spot in the live streaming room for more than 10 years. He had only made 8 comments and his ID was, Medical can't save stupid. I didn't want to make so few comments. As a doctor, I'll get beaten up by my patients if I watch live streaming during work hours. He carefully identified the herbs in the room with the girl's body, and the viewers cheered him on. Judging from the situation earlier, this lucky guy should be a Western doctor, but he could identify Chinese herbs. That was amazing. Doctors had good job prospects. Many high school students asked the lucky guy if he had any recommendations. They wanted to learn medicine too. The lucky guy pouted and snorted, "You'll be struck by lightning if you try to persuade people to learn medicine." The viewers immediately applauded the lucky guy's straightforwardness. He had spoken out the thoughts of countless medical students and hospital workers. Tudu Feichio, the lucky guy is complaining. Is work not going well? The viewers liked to chat, but they were more interested in digging up gossip. There must be a story behind the lucky guy's words. Sure enough, the lucky guy said coldly, "Of course work is not going well. Guess how I got here? In the end, it was the patient who hacked it." As a doctor who had switched from Chinese medicine to Western medicine, he had spent many years as an intern in the hospital before he became a full-time doctor and worked diligently in the hospital. He asked himself if he was worthy of himself and his patients. Despite the bad atmosphere of medical disputes, he had worked hard for so long. Even if he had not made any contributions, he had worked hard. Unfortunately, her luck was really bad. She was sent to the ICU by the pregnant woman's husband right after she finished one surgery. Sigh, there are too many idiots in the world. Learning medicine can't save them. The European emperor heaved a sigh of relief and made a smoking gesture. When I chose to study medicine, I was also full of enthusiasm. I had the heart to save the world and the people. However, brain damage is an incurable disease. I have the heart to save it, but I can't do anything about it. Giving birth to a boy or a girl has nothing to do with me. It's not like I'm king his wife up. 5 million salted fish. Looking at a delicate and pretty little girl using a soft voice to say such crude words, it hurt his eyes. */omega*. Working cells. I don't understand. What does this have to do with you being the chosen lucky emperor? It has something to do with it. The European emperor sighed. About half a month ago, I performed a cesarean section. The pregnant woman and the baby girl were safe. However, the pregnant woman's husband and mother-in-law were not happy about it. They made a scene at the hospital saying that they went to Hong Kong for an ultrasound and that it was a boy. They suspected that the hospital had sold the precious boy in exchange for a girl. They were very agitated and ignored the pregnant woman and the baby. They stabbed me with a fruit knife. I was sent to the emergency room and stayed in the ICU for a few days. I was hospitalized because of a work-related injury. That's why I have the time to watch the live broadcast. Do you know that the ICU costs nearly 10,000 a day? If it weren't for my insurance, I don't know how long I would have to work for the hospital for free to recoup my losses. After saying that, the European emperor sadly wiped away non-existent tears and sighed. Teasy. 5 million salted fish quietly replied, "It's not easy. Those who hear it will be sad and those who see it will cry." Tudu Faccio. Misfortune and good fortune depend on each other. Might not be a bad thing. Isn't it just a lucky transmigration? According to the popularity of the live broadcast, your story will be on the hot search list in minutes. Those who hurt you will be forced to give you an explanation. The European emperor was not a person who liked to be stubborn. Although he had suffered an unexpected misfortune, he would not give up his favorite job because of fear of choking. The salted fish were no longer jealous of the European emperor after hearing what happened to him. After all, this was what the European emperor deserved. This body belonged to the village's barefoot doctor. Whenever the villagers had a headache or fever, they would come to her. Therefore, there were many common herbs in the house, most of which were used to treat headaches and fever. The European emperor prescribed some medicine for Yan Lin's fever and asked the general to take it to the kitchen. The European emperor said, "His wound should not be moved. Let him rest here for a while." Although the European emperor could only stay for 12 hours, this body belonged to the barefoot doctor. Minor illnesses could be treated. The general carefully brought the hot medicine to Yan Lin. He blew on it to cool it down and fed it to Yan Lin. Hearing the European emperor's suggestion, the general looked a little hesitant. The longer he stayed, the more likely his identity would be exposed. However, the military advisor's condition made it difficult for him to move. The European emperor knew who they were, so he wisely chose to keep quiet and did not ask any more questions. On the other side, Yan Lin dismissed the soldiers who were willing to leave. The soldiers exchanged the things he gave them for money and were ready to leave. However, they could not hide their whereabouts from Fu Wang's troops. They were soon caught and interrogated. Some of them refused to confess, but others were afraid of death. Faced with all kinds of torture devices in the cell, they were so scared that they almost wet their pants. I'll tell you. Don't kill me." Some of them couldn't help but confess. The others gave up to save their lives. Fu Wang then realized that Yan Lin had brought his men into the mountains to look for bamboo to make bamboo rafts to escape. The moment he got the news, he sent his troops to chase after them. In the middle of the night, they caught another group of soldiers who had escaped, but Yan Lin was not among them. Where did Yan Xiaoyang go? Fu Wang was not a good-tempered man. He chose to use violence to force them to talk. Heaven would reward those who waited. Finally, he found out the truth. Yan Lin was seriously ill, and the deputy general took him ashore to seek treatment. Xianxia was woken up by Fu Wang in the middle of the night. After listening to what he had to say, he analyzed, if that's the case, Yan Lin's condition must be so serious that his life is in danger. There are only small fishing villages in the nearby waters, and there are no decent medical centers, let alone doctors with superb medical skills. You mean, Yan Lin is very likely to die of illness? Xianxia snorted. If he's alive, I want to see his body. Even if it's just Yan Lin's body, it's more valuable than an ordinary person's. Fu Wang said, if that's the case, then I'll send someone to search the fishing villages. I'm sure we can find Yan Lin. Although the general was very cautious, he still left traces when he dragged the bamboo raft into the reeds. The soldiers followed the clues and located them. The next day, when the fishermen were about to go fishing, a group of strange soldiers came to the village. Did any of you see any strangers last night? Chapter 1571. The fishermen didn't care who had sneaked into their village as long as they didn't get involved. Out of self-protection, they quickly told the police where Yan Lin and his wife were. At the same time, they were looking forward to it. The arrest had caused such a big commotion. Maybe the two escaped criminals were sentenced to death. If they reported them, they might even be rewarded. The fishing village was small, so the commotion at the entrance would spread to the other end of the village. When the soldiers arrived at the fishing village to question people, Lucky Emperor, who was out drying his medicine, realized that they were here for Yanlin. After standing still for 3 seconds, he decided to pretend that nothing had happened. He lowered his head and continued drying his medicine. 5 million salted fish stayed up with him for a long night. He told Oh Huang that the medical dispute that happened in his hospital had reached the top of the hot search list at the speed of a rocket. The weird husband, daughter-in-law and mother-in-law of that family had also been dug out and hung on the wall with their names. It was illegal to search for human flesh, but Lucky Emperor wasn't a saint. He appreciated the salted fish's good intentions. The family had shamelessly accused the hospital of swapping the baby. They refused to admit their mistake and refused to pay for the medical treatment and surgery fees. The hospital didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so Lucky Emperor had to suffer. In order to pay for the surgery, he had used all his savings from his years of work. People who didn't know the truth would think that doctors were so rich that their family would rush to give them red packets whenever they performed a C-section. They didn't know that the hospital had its own rules. There were doctors and family members like that, but they couldn't condemn all doctors. He was on a fixed salary. The family members gave him red packets to make them feel at ease. They thought that the doctor would take extra care of the pregnant woman. He knew this rule. He accepted the red packets to make them feel at ease. He gave them back after the surgery to live up to the oath he made when he was studying medicine. Therefore he could only count on his salary. Every month, apart from his basic necessities and a fixed deposit of 1,000 yuan, he transferred the rest of the money to his parents. Hearing the salted fish say that the family had been hung on the wall, Lucky Emperor couldn't help but gloat. Fan Ziwu, I saw the news. I thought it was the man and his family that were weird. I didn't expect the woman to be weird too. Poor girl who reincarnated into their family. In order to prove their innocence, the hospital paid for a paternity test. The family said that the hospital and the DNA testing agency were in cahoots with each other and forged the report. In other words, why didn't this family of sticklers kidnap a monkey to the heavens? Tong tong de, discriminating against women is the saddest thing, especially when this woman was a mother. She was so angry that she exploded on the spot. Poor girl, she was born into such a family. What would she do in the future? When the European king told them about his experience, the salted fish automatically imagined him as a weak and helpless mother. When the resourceful salted fish dug up all the information about them, he realized that the mother was also a genius among geniuses. It was said that the mother-in-law planned to stomp the child to death after taking it home, so as not to delay the birth of a second child. The child's mother sadly chose to stand by and watch. In the end, it was the neighbor who realized that something was wrong and saved the child. When the neighbor called the police, he was also threatened by the family. They had seen strange people, but they had never seen such strange people. How did they sneak into the human path from the animal path? Today was the best day in Europe. He was humming a tune as he dried the medicine. The group of soldiers in the distance surrounded her and approached her. The salted fishes were stunned when they saw that Lucky Emperor wasn't going to warn them. Jasmine Qingxiang, no, Mr. Lucky Emperor, aren't you going to wake them up? The European king smiled. I saved them because I'm a doctor. As a doctor, I can't just leave them to die. Yanlin's injury is almost healed and the rest is not my job as a doctor. I don't want to get involved in this. Also, if I wake them up, the owner of this body will be beaten into an ally. The host is not at the Xianxia battlefield, so he can't protect the little girl. I'd better not force myself. Although the European king was a salted fish, he was not a man without principles. He liked Yanlin, but no matter how much he liked his idol, he couldn't sacrifice an innocent life. The best thing to do was to pretend to be deaf and dumb and stay neutral. Yanlin was still unconscious in the room. The general had been taking care of him all night and was exhausted. He wouldn't wake up anytime soon. A man who was probably a centurion approached the European king and said, "Someone said that you took in 2 suspects last night?" The European king was about to answer when he saw a few soldiers entering the room to arrest the suspects. The corner of his mouth twitched. They were already in the room. Wasn't it unnecessary to ask him? There were indeed 2 people who came to seek treatment last night. What's wrong? The centurion knew from the villagers that the European king's body was a barefoot doctor in the village, so he didn't blame him. There was a sudden shout from inside the room, followed by the sound of fighting. It didn't take long for it to calm down. Soon, the deputy general's hands were twisted behind his back and tied up. He was escorted out of the room. The European king said, The one lying in the room is seriously injured and needs to rest. Don't move him. Be careful. Thank you for the reminder. The European king added, remember to pay for the treatment of these two people and the damage to my room. The centurion couldn't help but laugh. He was a fierce man and no one was afraid of him. How dare this young doctor bargain with him? Don't worry, the young lady will be paid. Because Yanlin was seriously injured, they didn't dare to act rashly. They could only send a message back and hope that the higher-ups would send a skilled military doctor over. In the end, not only the military doctor but Xianxia also came. Yan Xiaoyang is still alive. He's really lucky. Xianxia sighed. After the examination, the military doctor told him that Yanlin was still alive because of his luck, but most of the credit should go to the doctor. Judging from the residue in the room, Yanlin's wound was very bad. His brain might have been burnt out. After the examination, the military doctor found that Yanlin's body temperature was normal, and his breath was stable. The wound was in good condition and the stitches were very neat. Most importantly, the stitches were much better than the ones used by the military doctor in the casualty camp. Xianxia couldn't help but look at the European king. The European king was stunned for a moment, but he didn't show any fear. Was he trying to see whose eyes were bigger? Xianxia looked away and whispered to a soldier. The soldier nodded and ran out. He came back after a while. That's strange. This young lady only knows how to treat simple headaches and fevers. How does she know how to do this? Xianxia was suspicious. The European king felt a chill down his spine. Was he going to expose himself? At this time, the centurion mentioned the consultation fee and the renovation of the room. Xianxia signaled to his attendant. The attendant took off the cloth bag hanging on his waist. This is the consultation fee. The life you saved is very important. It's worth it. Xianxia was a stingy man. The consultation fee he paid was actually the money that Yanlin gave to the soldiers. There was a finely carved jade pendant, a jade piccolo and a dozen solid gold balls that weighed about half a kilo. Xianxia walked up to the European king, put one hand on his shoulder and lowered his head. Are you a mountain ghost too? The European king's body stiffened. Xianxia chuckled. In Salted Fish's words, the laughter was very sad. Chapter 1572. What did you say? I don't understand you. Lucky King tried to struggle but Xianxia didn't say anything. He just smiled meaningfully. Don't smile like that. I'm scared. Lucky King couldn't help but cower. He was a law-abiding citizen of the new era, but Xianxia was a ruthless man who had killed countless people in this chaotic world. Xianxia smiled and asked Lucky King, is it fun to see mountain ghosts as cowards? Before Lucky King could answer, the 5 million viewers in the live broadcast room were the first to protest. What did he mean by mountain ghosts as cowards? Didn't he know that Mountain Ghost was the nickname of the viewers? Looking down on mountain ghosts was looking down on them. Sibei Fazang, don't be scared, Lucky King. Beat Rong Rong up until he calls you daddy. Midnight Epilepsy, we can lose our heads and bleed, but we can't lose our reputation as mountain ghosts. We are advanced intellectuals of the new era. How can we be looked down upon by an old-fashioned person? Go up and beat him up until he calls you daddy. I believe you can do it, Lucky King. Lucky King was speechless. He suddenly realized that it wasn't easy to be a streamer. She had made it this far with 5 million viewers holding her back. Listen. They were just a group of onlookers who didn't mind making things bigger. If he was really fooled by them, Xianxia might even beat his brains out. Television dramas kept saying that scholars were useless, but in fact, scholars in ancient times learned all 6 arts, including horsemanship, archery, and swordsmanship. If you really wanted to do something, you had to be resolute. I have a question. Lucky King saw a few soldiers moving the unconscious Yanlin onto a stretcher. He was glad that Yanlin's fever had subsided in the second half of the night, and the general had already dressed him. Otherwise, it would have been embarrassing. What are you going to do with him? As for this, it still depends on my lord. If Yanlin is willing to surrender, it will save us a lot of effort. Why do you ask? He's my patient after all. It wasn't easy for him to escape from the gates of hell. If you kill him, it will make my previous effort seem stupid. I'll feel more at ease if I ask. Lucky Emperor's mood was a little heavy. As a doctor, he was used to seeing life and death. He had been honed during his internship in various departments. However, humans were not plants. Even if he was used to seeing some things, he would not be numb to it. The battles between the feudal lords and the internal strife of the chaotic world resulted in countless deaths and injuries. The lives of those who were sacrificed were as worthless as grass. He understood this logically, but he still felt pity and sympathy for them. If these people lived in peaceful times, they would probably have a happier life. There are nobles and lowly people. Yan Xiaoyang's head is worth countless people's heads. Valuable people would not easily lose their lives, and Yan Xiaoyang was clearly such a person. He was far more valuable alive than dead. Unless he no longer has any value or his death is more valuable, then. Yang Si deliberated and said, according to the master's temperament, as long as Yan Lin is willing to surrender, he will not die. Lucky King could not help but roll his eyes in his heart. Who didn't know that? He also knew that the host was narrow-minded and could not tolerate the slightest bit of betrayal. As long as he was in her camp, the word betrayal was a taboo. If that's the case, I know what to do. Seeing that the soldiers had taken Yan Lin away, Lucky King made up an excuse and said, someone disturbed my sleep last night and I couldn't sleep at all. If you don't have any other instructions, I'll go back to my room to rest. Forgive me for not seeing you out. Yang Si did not stop him. He secretly sent someone to keep an eye on Lucky King and report to him if there was anything unusual. According to the previous experience, the so-called mountain ghosts could not stay in the world for too long. After they left, the possessed people would not remember what they had done. Yang Si only needed to observe if there was any change in the person's temperament before and after being possessed by the mountain ghost, so he could tell if the person had left or not. Yang Si's mood was as bright as the spring flowers when he caught Yan Lin, the fish that escaped the net. However, the fish that escaped the net was not happy at all. Yan Lin woke up in the evening. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw a strange beam on the roof. Instinctively, he wanted to jump up, but as soon as he tried, he found that his body was weak and he felt a sharp pain in his shoulder. Yan Lin lay back down weakly, panting slightly. His hands were clenched into fists by his sides. This was definitely not. His lips were pressed into a thin line, and his eyes were filled with complicated emotions. Sir, you're awake? At that moment, footsteps were heard from outside. A woman in a dark gray outfit with red trimmings came in with a medical kit. Even a prisoner gets this kind of treatment? Apart from Jiang Pingji, no other feudal lord in the world would use a female military doctor. Yan Lin was even more certain of his situation. Even a prisoner has the right to live until he is dealt with. My lord is not a bloodthirsty person. Moreover, you're different from ordinary people. You're very valuable. Of course, we need to take good care of you. The military doctor was good at talking, but Yan Lin thought that she was talking nonsense. What are you doing? Yan Lin saw that the military doctor was about to untie his belt. He frowned and raised his hand to stop her. Sir, the wound on your shoulder needs to be taken care of. Wipe it regularly and get rid of the filth. Otherwise, it will fester and turn red again. The military doctor brushed his hand away and took off his shirt, revealing his shoulder. You're a patient now. You should cooperate with the doctors. Don't throw a tantrum. Yan Lin thought back to how he was before he fell ill and kept quiet. Sir, the doctor that General C found for you is very good. The stitches on the wound are excellent. If the healing goes well, the stitches will be removed in 10 days. The military doctor said, the wound will sting later. Please bear with it for a while, sir. Oh Huang took good care of the wound. Yan Lin showed no signs of infection again. The military doctor only needed to change the dressing regularly. It was very easy. Is this alcohol? The military doctor said, it's hard liquor. It's used to treat wounds. Don't drink it. Yang Si wrote a letter to his lord excitedly. Although he didn't catch Yang Tao, it was still a great victory to catch Yan Lin. Fu Wang led the army to clear the remaining soldiers and officially incorporated Zhangzhou into Jiang Pingji's territory. He didn't go after Yang Tao. Instead, he listened to the military counselor's plan. He rested and rested, waiting for the enemy to die. About 10 days later, the military doctor removed the stitches on Yan Lin's shoulder. Young people tended to recover quickly. Other than losing a few pounds, Yan Lin was doing fine. Yang Si asked the military doctor in charge of Yan Lin, how is he? How is his recovery? The military doctor answered honestly. Yan Lin was recovering well. However, the wound was too long. If he moved too much or was too emotional, it might rupture. Yang Si said with regret, is that so? What a pity. The military doctor asked curiously, What a pity. Xianxia said, I have a piece of bad news that will make him fly into a rage after hearing it. One Buddha is born, 2 Buddhas will ascend to heaven. But you said that he hasn't fully recovered yet. If I tell him, the wound will rupture again. Won't that cause more trouble for you? The military doctor was speechless. He had heard that scholars were evil, but he didn't expect them to be this evil. Chapter 1573. What news could Xianxia possibly have that could make Yanlin so furious that he was about to fly into a rage? The doctor suppressed her curiosity and focused on her work. Every time she changed Yanlin's bandages, she would show a strange expression. These fellows who were able to become strategists in troubled times, whether it was observation or analysis, were simply not something an ordinary person could imagine. After a few days, Yanlin finally couldn't help but ask the doctor for more information. What happened outside? The doctor had just changed the bandages and was about to pack up and leave so that Yanlin could rest. Suddenly hearing this question, she couldn't help but be startled. It wasn't that she was startled, but that she was flattered. She had been taking care of Yanlin for a long time. Except for the first few words they exchanged on the first day, Yanlin had been indifferent the rest of the time. Occasionally he would reply with, oh, or, it doesn't hurt. She couldn't expect him to initiate a conversation. Did the sun rise from the west today? Sir, were you talking to me? The doctor looked at Yanlin, who was sitting up, and couldn't help but confirm. There are only 2 of us in the room. If I wasn't talking to you, would I be talking to a demon? There was a hint of mockery in his words, but it didn't give off an offensive or rude feeling. The doctor asked, Sir, why do you ask? Yanlin straightened his clothes and fastened his belt. No one would have guessed that he was a prisoner. He looked more like a respectable young master than a prisoner. From a doctor's point of view, Yanlin was definitely a patient who was very cooperative. It was also very comfortable to take care of him. With the patient's cooperation and the doctor's efforts, Yanlin's injuries recovered quickly. He was able to walk a few days ago. Except for the fact that he couldn't do any strenuous exercises or carry heavy objects, he was no different from an ordinary person. Yanlin said, You've been changing the bandages these days. You look strange. Something must have happened outside. It has something to do with me. The doctor was speechless. Was she really that obvious? But, sir, please don't make things difficult for me. I don't know what happened, and even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. The doctor refused directly. She said, The military camp has its rules. I can't tell outsiders without permission. Please forgive me. Yanlin remained calm. He was not surprised by the doctor's answer. If the military doctor revealed the news without hesitation, he would be mocking Jiang Pingji for not being strict with her subordinates. If that's the case, please find someone who can talk to you. Yanlin said in a self-mocking tone, Since I'm already a prisoner, I should be treated like one. I've been locked up here all day to recover from my injuries. People who don't know what's going on might think that I'm a guest of honor. The military doctor relayed Yanlin's words to Xianxia. Coincidentally, Fengzhen was also present. When the 2 of them heard this, they looked at each other and smiled with ill intentions. The military doctor felt his hair stand on end when he saw this. Xianxia dismissed the military doctor with a few words. I understand. You can go and do your own things. I'll find time to visit him in the evening. The military doctor retreated. Fengzhen, who was sitting on the side, tapped his palms with his closed golden fan. Are we really going to tell Yanlin? Xianxia smiled and said, He'll find out sooner or later. The earlier we tell him, the earlier he'll give up. If Yan Xiaoyang wants to commit suicide, I'll prepare something for him. White silk, poisoned wine, a dagger, a long sword. I'll have everything. Even if he dies, he'll die a dignified death. Fengzhen said, You're gloating. If the 2 of them weren't on good terms, Fengzhen would have added, a villain intoxicated by success. Of course, if he said that, Xianxia would probably hold a grudge against him. Who knew when Xianxia would cause trouble for him? Xianxia straightened his chest and said confidently, I'm gloating. Therefore Xianxia went to see Yanlin in a gloating mood. It was obvious that Yanlin wanted to see him, but when Xianxia came, he didn't say a word. Seeing this, Xianxia decided that silence was golden. He wanted to see how long Yanlin could hold it in. Neither of them spoke first. They just drank their tea in silence. Finally, Xianxia couldn't hold it in anymore. More than half of the tea on the table had gone into his stomach. If the stalemate continued, he wouldn't be able to hold it in anymore. I heard that you wanted to see me. What's the matter? Xianxia spoke first. His tone was very unfriendly. I want to ask about two things, of course. Yanlin was very straightforward. What do you plan to do with me? How is my lord? These two questions are not difficult to answer. Xianxia didn't deliberately keep Yanlin in suspense. He said straightforwardly, as for how to deal with you, it's up to my lord to decide. I'm just a small military advisor. I don't have the right to overstep my lord's authority, let alone make decisions for my lord. As for your lord Yang Tao, he's not in a very good situation. A few days ago I received a piece of news. It has something to do with you and your lord Yang Tao. However, the military doctor said that your injury hasn't healed yet. I was afraid that your injury would worsen if you heard about it, so I kept it a secret for you. Xianxia looked like he was doing this for his own good, but Yanlin didn't buy it. He said indifferently, it doesn't matter. I've recovered from my injury. Tell me what you want. Xianxia suddenly revealed an unfathomable smile, all the malice written on his face. I wonder if you've heard of this saying, those who are not of our race will always have a different heart. Yanlin said, of course I've heard of it. What do you mean by that? The foreign tribes near Dongqing and Nanxing were the 4 tribes of Nanman and the 3 tribes of the northern borderline. Both of them had been wiped out. How could they still cause trouble? This saying comes from Zhou Xian. It says, those who are not of our race will always have a different heart. Although Chu is big, those who are not of our race will never be willing to be with us. This tribe is not a tribe of ethnic groups but a clan. This saying can not only be used for clans and ethnic groups, but it can also be used for countries. Xianxia said with a smile. Yanlin clenched his fists on his knees. He had a vague guess in his mind. And then, Xianxia said, Yang Tao was born in Dongqing. He treated the old officials of Dongqing very leniently. This has already made the gentry from Nanxing extremely dissatisfied. Now that the battle in Zhangzhou has failed, Yang Tao has lost more than 100,000 soldiers. Most of these soldiers, except for a few who were recruited from Zhangzhou, were brought from Nanxing. What will the gentry from Nanxing who sided with Yang Tao think after losing so many soldiers? The conflict between the two has become even more intense. If there is an external force at this time, Yang Tao will be in a very dangerous situation. Yanlin's eyes turned cold. External force? Xianxia waved his hand and said, don't look at me like that. My lord is an upright person. He would never do such despicable things. Yanlin snorted. Even a ghost wouldn't believe Xiaxi's words. However, Yanlin also knew that Jiang Pingji couldn't have done this. And Cui. Yanlin's heart skipped a beat. He spat out 2 cold words. Chapter 1574. What did An Cui do? Xianxia grinned at Yanlin. Every word he said was full of malice, like poison in his mouth. Yanlin looked at Xianxia calmly and asked again, what did An Cui do? Xianxia smiled. Take a guess. Yanlin was speechless. If it weren't for the fact that he had yet to recover from his injuries and that he was a prisoner, and that there were more than 10 guards standing outside the door, he really wanted to cross the short table between the two of them and beat Xianxia up. But he didn't know that this was Xiaxi's evil side. He knew that the others were as anxious as ants on a hot pan. The more he kept his cool, the more he had to keep them in suspense. Only when they ran out of patience would he give in. Except for the Lord, Jiang Pingji, all of Xiaxi's colleagues had tried this trick. In Jiang Pingji's words, Xianxia was asking for trouble. He had the chance to build a good relationship with his colleagues, but he had to make enemies for himself. The 5 million salted fish gave him a nickname. Yang? Don't ask for trouble? See. Yanlin's heart was in turmoil. His calm, dark eyes were filled with anger, but Xianxia didn't notice it at all. No wonder you brought so many people. You know your place. Yanlin mocked him. I heard that Yanlin of Zhangzhou is a man of both pen and sword. Even though he has been acting like a scholar in recent years, I have heard of his reputation when he was young. I dare not be careless. Xianxia winked mischievously. Yanlin didn't think it was cute. He only thought it was disgusting. When Yanlin was young, the situation in Dongqing deteriorated rapidly. Chaos broke out everywhere. Zhangzhou, which was controlled by the aristocrats, was no exception. Even though Yang Jian and his men had beaten the water bandits to the point that they didn't dare to show their faces, it didn't mean that the water bandits had completely disappeared. There were still many water bandits who raided homes and bullied the villagers. Yang Tao was young and envied the carefree life of the rangers. So he decided to take Yanlin with him and explore the world. He was a righteous man who liked to stick his nose into things that weren't fair. Every time he did, he would be hunted down. At this point, most people would have thought that the two of them were just Yang Tao killing monsters to attract aggro, and Yanlin killing them to gain experience. That wasn't true. In the years that they were rangers, most of the pirates were killed by Yanlin. Yang Tao thought that the water bandits could turn over a new leaf by surrendering, but Yanlin did not give them a chance to speak. In a group fight, Yanlin could also fight well. His weapons were a pair of swords. It was said that the master blacksmiths of the present age had spent a great deal of effort to forge them. The sword in the left hand weighed 9 catties while the right one weighed 10 catties. The two swords added together were much heavier than the weapons of ordinary warriors. It was very strenuous to carry them, not to mention using them to kill enemies. When Yang Si heard Fengzhen talk about this gossip, he couldn't believe it at all. Fengzhen said, "Believe it or not, it's up to you. Remember to bring more people with you when you provoke Yanlin. Otherwise I'll have to collect your corpse." Therefore when Yang Si saw Yanlin, his first reaction was to look at his face. His eyes moved from his shoulders to his arms to his hands to his chest. He was dressed in a scholarly robe, and his long hair was neatly combed and secured with a crown. His facial features were elegant and his potential was outstanding. From head to toe there was not a trace of a warrior's aura. Yanlin sneered, "If you don't want to say it, then don't say it. You can't change anything." Yang Si was speechless. This wasn't going according to the script. Yang Si was a man with a thick skin. If his face was in a story, he would definitely be the villain. He wouldn't survive more than 3 chapters. "Oh, why don't you tell us what happened so that we can compare? I want to see if the person Feng Zisha admires is worthy of his reputation or not." Yang Si tried to save face for himself and tried to provoke Yanlin to continue the conversation. Yanlin said, "And Cui is ambitious. His strategist Hua Yuan is also a cunning man with ulterior motives. The epidemic that broke out during the conquest of the 4 tribes of Nanman was most likely part of their plan. They plotted against my lord Yang Tao and Lu Shi, trying to profit from the conflict. According to Enchui's plan, Lu Shi would have lost many of his elite forces under the joint attack of my lord and the Nye family of Zhongzhou. That way he could hide in the back and take advantage of the situation to devour the 3 families. Who would have thought that Lu Shi would win in the end? How could Enchui sit still? He must have made a move." How many people in the world were watching the 2 battlefields? No one could have imagined that the ending would be like this. Jiang Pingji's family defeated the Yang and Nye families. She still had some troops left. The Yang and Nye families were greatly weakened. Nye Liang died of illness at the front line. More than 200,000 elite troops died at Zhangjiang Pass. Yang Tao lost Zhangzhou because of a mistake and lost more than 100,000 troops. How could Enchui sit still in the face of such a situation? If he allowed Jiang Pingji to devour Yang Tao, he would be the next one to die. To save himself, Enchui could only change his original plan. He went from behind the scenes to the front and joined the battle. He could either join forces with Yang Tao or take over Yang Tao's territory and troops. If he joined forces with Yang Tao, Enchui still needed to support Yang Tao's troops and supplies. Even if he won against Jiang Pingji, he would still have to fight with Yang Tao, who had recovered his strength. If he chose to devour Yang Tao, it was equivalent to nipping his future enemy in the bud. Both options had their pros and cons. On the whole, the benefits of the latter were greater than the former. Yang Tao was half dead now. He did not have many troops left. He was in dire need of supplies. The Nanxing aristocrats who had supported him had many complaints about him. What about Enchui? After the crusade against the 4 factions of Nanman, Enchui's power in Nanxing had multiplied. His reputation had also reached its peak. He was born into the aristocrats of Nanxing. His interests were closer to the local aristocrats. In terms of status, he had more political advantages than Yang Tao. According to Yanlin's speculation, Enchui had most likely sent people to persuade the aristocrats who disliked Yang Tao. He would promise them benefits to win them over to his side. The aristocrats also cared about benefits. Yang Tao could not bring them any benefits. It was natural for them to abandon Yang Tao. Yanlin could totally imagine what would happen to Yang Tao when he returned to the city under Enchui's plan. And Cui took advantage of the moment when my army was defeated and the people's hearts were wavering. I'm not surprised at all. Yanlin calmly analyzed the situation Yang Tao was facing. He did not expect Xianxia to still look at him as if he had guessed wrong. Not only that, they're making false accusations. Yanlin's eyes widened in shock. He stared at Xianxia. What? Xianxia said, how many aristocrats do you think Cui has instigated? A small number. The news of Yang Tao's defeat had just spread. More than half of them had already switched sides. The remaining few were just watching silently. Yang Tao is not leading his army back to the Nanxing army. He's courting death. Crack. Xia's sharp ears heard something. He looked down and was shocked to see that Yanlin had crushed a teacup with his bare hands. Chapter 1575. Yanlin didn't take Xia's provocation seriously at first, but now he wanted to kill him. Just as he said, if Xianxia had not placed more than a dozen guards outside the door, he would have pressed Xianxia down and beaten him up. Is there worse news? Yanlin was a calm and collected person. He rarely lost his composure, even if Xia's news couldn't be any worse. Xianxia smiled. Of course there is. I'll tell you. You have to stay calm. Yanlin was silent for a while. He had asked around about Jiang Pingji's subordinates. Xianxia was one of Jiang Pingji's most important officials, so he naturally paid attention to him. He just wanted to catch the person who collected the information and give him a good scolding. The information was so inaccurate. In the information, Xianxia was described as cunning and unruly. He didn't care about trifles. Except for his poor family background, there was nothing wrong with him. Unfortunately, Xia's reputation didn't live up to his reputation. It was hard to explain. Go ahead. I'm listening. Yanlin was a man of few words. Xianxia said, when the two armies fought, Yang Tao sent his wife and son away in advance. As soon as he started, Yanlin almost lost his composure again. Hidden in his eyes, there seemed to be a storm brewing. When Yang Tao sent his troops to fight against our army, and Cui sent someone to persuade the Nanxing aristocrats. When the news of Yang Tao's defeat spread, the Nanxing aristocrats who had been hesitant completely changed sides. To show their loyalty and to threaten Yang Tao, they detained Yang Tao's wife and son as well as your family members. Xianxia wasn't being naughty. His deep voice was like a small hammer hitting Yanlin's heart. Yanlin had already crushed the teacup. He had nothing else in his hands, so the table in front of him was damaged. Xianxia saw with his own eyes that Yanlin had crushed a corner of the table when he lost control. He suddenly thought of his lord's bronze table. Yanlin and his lord had a tacit understanding when it came to abusing tables. However, Yanlin was a normal person. The most he could do was abuse a wooden table. He couldn't break a bronze or iron table. He concluded that his lord was not human. I heard that Yang Tao is a righteous and hot-blooded man. His wife and children are in the enemy's hands and he is in a dilemma. What will he do? Xianxia said calmly, will he abandon his wife and children, or will he surrender and wait for death? Yanlin looked calm, but he was not. His emotions were like the ocean under a thunderstorm. The waves rolled and rolled as if the world was about to be turned upside down. He knew his best friend very well. His wife, children, and younger sister were his lifelines. And Cui had really played a good hand. Yanlin's chest heaved violently. He was so angry that his eyes were bloodshot. Cui. How? Yanlin had always looked down on Cui, and now he was so angry that he wanted to eat him alive. There's no point in holding a grudge against Cui now. You should take care of your health first. Seeing that Yanlin was so angry, Xianxia was ready to do a hula dance in his heart. He added fuel to the fire. Where there's life, there's hope. Cui was just a vile person who got what he wanted. My lord doesn't like him. Once she's done with him, Cui will be next. Yanlin's eyes were bloodshot. Xiaxia's heart skipped a beat. What a villain. Yanlin said this while looking at Xianxia. Anyone who wasn't deaf could tell that he was insulting both of them at the same time. Cui was a vile person intoxicated by success. But wasn't this Xianxia, who was adding fuel to the fire and didn't mind making things worse, the same? That's right. And Duishi won't be jumping around for long. Xianxia didn't take it to heart. He didn't care if Yanlin scolded him. He would have plenty of chances to get back at him when they worked together. Thinking of this, Xianxia became even more confident, and an enigmatic smile appeared on his lips. Of course, there was another way to describe this. The one who provoked him first was AB*T. Xi's actions would not have lasted more than 3 sentences in a serious story. Yanlin was speechless. What kind of people did the rumored Duke of Lanting gather under her banner? The worst part was that he had lost to someone like this. Rest well here, Xianxia said. I got the news a few days ago. I wanted to tell you, but the doctor said that you haven't fully recovered yet. If you get angry or sad, your wound might rupture. For your own good, I delayed the news until today. Yanlin's answer was he. Even if he didn't know that he was the same as buying a watch last year, a cold laugh was a good way to express his mood. Xianxia wasn't a good guy either. Yanlin wasn't stupid. He didn't believe a word Xianxia said. Wait, Yanlin stopped Xianxia, who was about to get up and leave. Xianxia turned to him and smiled. What else? Do you know where my wife and the others are being held? Zhou Xian was Yang Tao's wife and Yanlin's sister. Yang Ruijia was Yang Tao's sister and Yanlin's wife. To Yanlin and Yang Tao, these 2 women were the most important family in the world. They couldn't let anything happen to them. Perhaps the heroes of this chaotic world did not care about 1 or 2 women. Or perhaps in their eyes, women were just accessories. Regardless of whether they were mothers, wives, or daughters for the sake of the great cause, they were all sacrificial victims. Some people would kick their own children out of the carriage at a critical moment. Some people would kill their wives, concubines, and daughters just to motivate the dispirited soldiers. Some people even said that a man would never worry about not having a wife. As long as he was successful, he could choose any woman in the world. Who would want a wife? Most people accepted this reasoning, but not Yang Tao and Yanlin. They were willing to get involved in this chaotic world to protect their families. If they sacrificed them for something else, wouldn't that be putting the cart before the horse? Xianxia said, Why do you ask? You're a prisoner now. Even if you're strong, you can't do anything. You can't save them. Yanlin said, If I know, I know. If I don't know, I don't know. Yo, how could a prisoner be so confident? Xianxia said, I don't know. Yanlin looked down and said, There's something I need your help with. Xianxia thought he had heard wrong. Was Yanlin asking for help? He looked at the sun outside and the guards who were ready for battle. He felt a little nervous. What is it? Xianxia didn't dare to agree immediately. Instead, he asked tentatively, Why don't you tell me? Help me write a letter to the Lord. Tell him not to bow down to Enchui for the sake of the Lord's wife. Xianxia was speechless. Was Yanlin an idiot? Xianxia was on Yang Tao's side. Why would he help him? Besides, if Yang Tao didn't care about his wife, children, sister, and nephew, those 4 people would be dead. Xianxia thought for a while and asked, Tell me what you're going to do. I'll consider if I should help you. Yanlin said, Stall for time and wait for news. Xianxia was confused. What was the difference between telling him and not telling him?